Hello beautiful people. Welcome to Arcane Paradox. In today's episode, we explore Sorting Hat detected soul fragment in Harry and broadcast Dumbledore 52-year Horcrux experiment. Hit like, subscribe, and join our community of story lovers. Let's begin. Chapter 1. The hat speaks aloud. The candles floated like they'd been suspended mid-fall, frozen in the act of dropping from the ceiling of the Great Hall, and Harry Potter stood at the back of a line of first years and thought about how strange it was that he still didn't know what any of this meant. He'd been thinking about it since the boats. Since the moment the castle had risen out of the lake like something that had been waiting underground and finally decided to surface, towers first, then the great sprawl of lit windows, then the reflection of all of it shaking apart in the black water below. He'd thought he'd feel something recognizable when he saw it. Relief, maybe. The sense of arriving somewhere that was supposed to be his. Instead he'd felt the thing he'd been feeling since Diagon Alley, since Hagrid had handed him that first birthday cake and the world had rearranged itself into a shape he didn't yet have language for. A kind of thrumming behind his sternum. Not excitement exactly. More like resonance. Like a tuning fork pressed against a bell. He'd told himself it was nerves. The line moved. Peeves had already tried twice to drop water balloons on them from somewhere above the staircase, and Professor McGonagall had not so much as glanced upward when she said, in a voice like a closing door, "Don't," and Peeves had vanished. Harry had filed that away. Don't, one word, no wand, no threat. Just a certainty so complete it functioned as a wall. He wanted to learn to speak like that. Nervous? Ron Weasley said from just behind him. A bit, Harry said, which was mostly true. Fred told me you have to fight a troll, Ron said. But then Fred also told me the sorting involves a written exam, so I've stopped listening to Fred. Was there a written exam? I'd have revised, Ron said mournfully. Hermione Granger, 3 people ahead, turned around long enough to give them both the look of someone who had in fact revised for the written exam just in case, and then turned forward again without a word. The great hall opened around them and Harry's breath caught, not at the ceiling, though the ceiling was genuinely extraordinary, all stars and moving cloud and the suggestion of infinite depth, but at the sheer scale of the attention. 4 long tables. Hundreds of faces turning. The candlelight catching the movement of 1,000 heads swiveling toward the door, toward the line of new students, toward him, and then past him, because most of them didn't know yet, and the ones who did were scanning the line with something between reverence and appetite. He caught a few whispered Harry Potters skipping down the tables like stones across water. He kept his face still. He'd had 10 years of practice making his face do nothing interesting. At the front of the hall, on a stool, sat a very old and very battered wizard's hat. It had a patched, frayed brim and a lopsided peak, and it looked like the kind of thing you'd find at the bottom of a charity bin and think, that's had a life. It also had a wide rip near the brim that, as Harry stared at it, creased and folded itself into something unmistakably like a mouth. The hat twitched. Looked at the incoming students. And then it sang. Harry didn't listen to the song very closely. He was watching Dumbledore. The headmaster sat at the center of the staff table, tall and unhurried, his half-moon spectacles catching the candlelight in a way that made his eyes hard to read. He looked like a man at a play he had seen many times and still found worthy of his attention. Comfortable. Settled. Occasionally smiling at something in the hat's lyrics. He had a small dish of what appeared to be sherbet lemons in front of him, and he ate one while the hat was finishing. That was the detail Harry couldn't stop turning over later. The sherbet lemon. The perfect, practiced ease of a man who had been here before and knew exactly how tonight was going to go. He didn't know yet that the hat had its own ideas. Professor McGonagall produced a scroll and began reading names. The first student, Abbott, Hannah, scrambled up to the stool and sat with her eyes squeezed shut, and after a long 10 seconds the hat roared, Hufflepuff, and the table on the far right erupted. Then Bones, Susan. Then Boot, Terry. Harry watched each one, calculating nothing in particular, just watching, because watching was something he was good at and it was better than standing in the line thinking about what the hat was going to say to him. He watched Draco Malfoy stroll up to the stool like he was accepting an award he'd already been told was his, and the hat had barely touched his head before yelling, "Slytherin," and the table second from the right applauded with what Harry could only describe as a specific kind of enthusiasm. Malfoy caught his eye on the way back and gave him a small nod that managed to be both civil and insufferable. Harry nodded back. He wasn't afraid of Draco Malfoy. He wasn't sure why he was so certain of that already, but he was. More names. Granger, Hermione, Gryffindor, after a moment's pause that made her nearly vibrate off the stool with anxiety. Longbottom, Neville, Gryffindor, after a pause so long that Neville had apparently forgotten to take the hat off and had to be gently reminded by McGonagall. Patil, Padma, Ravenclaw. Patil, Parvati, Gryffindor. The scroll was getting shorter. Potter, Harry. The whispers exploded. He walked to the stool and sat down. The hat dropped over his eyes and the great hall disappeared into a felt-end darkness that smelled of dust and something older, cedar, maybe, or whatever wood smells like when it's been in contact with centuries of thinking. "Well," said a voice, dry and deliberate and so close it felt like it was behind his own eyes. "Well, well." "Hello," Harry thought. "Oh, you're a polite one. Most of them are too busy panicking to say hello." A pause. "You're not panicking. Should I be?" "Most people who are carrying what you're carrying would be," the hat said, and something changed in its voice, not dramatically, not with fanfare, but the way a room temperature drops when someone opens a window you didn't know was closed. "Most people who are carrying what you're carrying," it said again, slower, "don't know they're carrying it." Harry went very still inside himself. "What am I carrying?" A long silence. He could feel the hat thinking, not in words, in something more like the sensation of being read, of being a page that something extraordinarily intelligent was moving through at speed, flipping, cross-referencing. He felt it move through the surface of him, the years at the Dursleys, the cupboard, the first time he'd made something happen accidentally and Dudley had run screaming, and then it went deeper, past the memories into something he didn't have a name for, something structural, something that had always been there the way a load-bearing wall is always there, and his tuning fork sensation in his chest kicked up 3 registers. "Oh," said the hat. And then, with unmistakable weight, "Oh, no." "What?" Harry thought, and he wasn't calm anymore. "There are 2 of you," the hat said. "Or rather, there is you, and then there is a piece of something that has wound itself around the core of you so thoroughly that I would need to unravel half your soul to find where one ends and the other begins." It sounded like it was describing a knot. A very old, very bad knot. I have been sorting students for 1,000 years. I have never," it stopped. Harry felt it gathering something. Resolution, maybe. Or the decision to do something it had never done before. "Don't," Harry thought, not knowing what he meant by it yet. "I have to," the hat said, with something that might have been an apology. "I am bound to truth. It is the oldest binding there is. If I speak at all, I speak truly. And if this truth exists in this room," another pause, shorter this time, "then this room must hear it." "Wait," Harry started. The Sorting Hat opened its ancient, frayed brim mouth and spoke, not into Harry's ear, not in the private dark interior of a student's skull, but outward, fully, with every voice it had accumulated over 1,000 years of holding the thoughts of the brilliant and the frightened and the brave and the lost. "There is a Horcrux in this boy." The silence lasted almost 2 full seconds. Then the great hall came completely apart. The sound was enormous and then immediately layered, chairs scraping, people standing, a single glass tipping off the end of the Ravenclaw table and shattering on the stone floor, and over all of it a wave of human noise that Harry, still sitting on the stool with the hat on his head, experienced at one remove, the way you hear things from underwater. A soul fragment. Deliberately anchored. Voldemort's. Someone screamed. Not one of the students, one of the adults at the staff table. Professor Quirrell, Harry realized distantly. Quirrell had knocked his chair back and was standing with his hands pressed to his face, and the purple turban he wore was trembling with the movement of his head. The hat still hadn't told Harry which house he was going to. He reached up, took it off his own head, and looked at it. The ancient brim mouth was still moving, still issuing its truth into the great hall like it couldn't stop, like the decision to speak had opened a valve that had no intermediate setting, and he thought, very clearly, I need to understand what you just told everyone before anyone can get to me and start explaining it in ways that serve them instead of me. He set the hat carefully back on the stool. He stood up. He turned around and looked at the room. It was extraordinary, the way fear moves through a crowd. It moved in a wave from the nearest tables outward, like a stone dropped in water. The students closest to him, Seamus Finnegan, who had a look of pure electrified horror, Lavender Brown with both hands over her mouth, Neville Longbottom, who had gone the precise color of old parchment, and beyond them the older students rising to their feet, some pushing back from the tables, some leaning in, and at the staff table the teachers in various states of controlled and uncontrolled reaction. Snape was the one Harry catalogued first, because Snape was already looking at him, not with the wild shock of the others, but with something precise and narrow and evaluating, the way you look at something you've been half expecting and are now calibrating your response to. McGonagall was on her feet, wand in hand, pointed at nothing in particular, which seemed to mean she didn't yet know what to point it at. Flitwick had fallen off his chair and was visible only as a hand above the table edge. Dumbledore had not moved. That was the thing Harry fixed on and held. In the entire great hall, in the cascading, escalating, beautiful chaos of 150 children and a dozen adults all having simultaneous crises of various magnitudes, Albus Dumbledore sat in his chair with his hands folded on the table in front of him and a sherbet lemon still in his cheek and did not move. Not surprise. Not shock. Not the scramble of a man caught off guard. Composure. The composure of someone who had already visited this information before, in private, at his leisure, and had arranged himself around it. Harry filed that away too. Harry. It was McGonagall, navigating through the chaos at speed, weaving between students with a path-clearing authority that was almost physical. She reached him and put both hands on his shoulders and looked at his face and, he saw her recalibrate, because he wasn't doing what she expected. He wasn't crying, he wasn't shaking, he wasn't about to faint. He was standing with his hands in his robe pockets looking at Dumbledore. Harry. With me. Now, please. Where are we going? He asked. Somewhere quiet. All right, he said. Then, can I take Hermione and Ron? McGonagall blinked. I beg your pardon. He looked at her steadily. Hermione Granger. Ron Weasley. I'd like them with me. They've just been sorted, it's not, I know. He held her gaze. I'd still like them. She looked at him for a long moment, this small, dark-haired 11-year-old who had just been told in front of 400 people that a piece of the darkest wizard alive was living inside him, and who was asking for the reasonable company of two classmates with the same tone someone uses to request a second helping of potatoes. Something moved across her face, not quite admiration, not yet. Something more careful than that. Fine, she said. Fine. Come. Behind him, the Sorting Hat cleared its throat, an extraordinary sound from a hat, very dry, very deliberate, and in a moment of bizarre normalcy that cut through the chaos like a knife, added, Gryffindor, by the way. There was a small sitting room off the corridor behind the staff table that Harry suspected was rarely used. It had the particular quality of a space that existed in the gaps of a larger architecture, sized for one or two people and currently holding Harry, Ron, Hermione, McGonagall, and a hovering and visibly unhappy Dumbledore who had arrived approximately 90 seconds after the others, unhurried, the way tides arrive. Lemon drop, he offered. No thank you, Harry said. Headmaster, McGonagall said, and her voice had an edge he suspected she usually kept sheathed. What does the hat mean? Specifically. I think, Dumbledore said, settling himself into a chair with the ease of someone accepting a throne, that what the hat means is exactly what it said. He turned to Harry. His eyes were, not unkind. That was the troubling part. They were warm. Genuinely, deeply warm, with layers of something that Harry's gut read as careful care, the kind of care that plans around you as much as for you. Harry. First, how are you feeling? Fine, Harry said. What's a Horcrux? A beat. Dumbledore looked at him. You've never heard the word. I've heard it twice in the last 5 minutes, Harry said. The hat said it. You repeated it. Nobody's told me what it means. It's dark magic, Hermione said, from the chair next to him. She'd pulled a book from somewhere. Harry had no idea how she'd gotten a book. They'd been in here 3 minutes, and was flipping through it. The deliberate splitting of a soul through an act of, she looked up. Murder. You split your soul with murder and you anchor the fragment in an object. The fragment is called a Horcrux. It keeps you alive. If your body is destroyed, the fragment persists. She paused. Harry. Did you know any of this? No, he said. What's an object in this case? Hermione's throat moved. She looked at the book. She looked at him. Anything, she said quietly. An object. An animal. She stopped. A person? Harry said. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. The room was very quiet. Ron was looking at Harry with the particular expression of someone who wants very badly to say something helpful and is correctly sensing that there are no helpful things to say. Harry, Dumbledore said, gently. This is a great deal to absorb. Yes, Harry agreed. How long have you known? The warmth in Dumbledore's eyes didn't shift. That was telling too. Known is a strong word. I have suspected, for some time, that the night Voldemort's curse rebounded. How long, Harry said, is some time. Headmaster. McGonagall had been watching the exchange with the focused stillness of a cat near a mousehole. I believe the boy is asking you a direct question. Dumbledore looked at her, then at Harry. He folded his hands in his lap. Several years, he said. I have suspected for several years. It was not true. Harry didn't know how he knew that, maybe the same instinct that had let him read the Dursleys' moods from a very young age, the survival skill of reading adults who were managing you, but he knew, with clear cold certainty, that it was not true. Dumbledore had suspected for longer than several years. Maybe much longer. He didn't say so. Not yet. He didn't have evidence yet, and he'd learned long before Hogwarts that you don't play a card until you can make it stick. All right, he said instead, pleasantly. What happens now? Now, Dumbledore said, we make sure you're safe, and we think carefully and quietly about, will it hurt me? Harry asked. The Horcrux. Is it hurting me right now? No, Dumbledore said. Not in any immediate sense. Will it control me? No more than, Dumbledore paused, choosing words. There is influence. Emotional permeability. But your own soul is strong, Harry. Stronger than he anticipated, I believe. He chose me on purpose. No, Dumbledore said. It was an accident. That night, when the curse rebounded, a fragment of his soul detached and latched onto the nearest living thing. He gestured toward Harry's forehead, toward the scar. The anchor point is there. Harry touched his scar with 2 fingers. He'd had it his entire life. He'd been told a car crash. He'd been told his parents died in a car crash and that was where the scar came from, and his aunt had said it every time he asked and eventually he'd stopped asking because the asking changed nothing and the scar stayed. He pressed his fingers against it and felt, nothing new. It was just a scar. It had always been just a scar. Except now it was something else, and had always been something else, and that knowledge sat in his chest alongside the tuning fork hum that he was now reconsidering entirely. That hum, he thought. That's not nerves. That's never been nerves. I want books, he said. Everything written about Horcruxes. Everything in this school's library. Some of that material is restricted, Harry said. I'd like access to the restricted section. For obvious reasons. McGonagall made a very small sound that in another context might have been a laugh. Dumbledore looked at him for a long moment, and Harry looked back, and what passed between them was not a battle, not yet. It was more like a first move. A hand laid on a chess piece. A signal of intention. Of course, Dumbledore said, warmly. Of course, Harry. Whatever you need. The feast happened eventually, though feast was the wrong word for the truncated, shell-shocked meal that followed 2 hours of emergency staff meetings, parental dispatches, and what Harry overheard McGonagall describe through a door as an absolute constitutional crisis for the governors. Food appeared. People ate some of it. The house tables had the atmosphere of 4 rooms in which a very dramatic thing had just been discussed at length and no one had yet arrived at a satisfying conclusion. Harry ate roast chicken and peas and thought. He thought about the hat saying there are 2 of you. He thought about the hum behind his sternum, Voldemort's soul fragment, wrapped around his own like ivy on a fence post. He thought about Dumbledore's timing, his unmoving composure, the sherbet lemon in his cheek. He thought about the word experiment, which he'd caught on the edge of a whispered staff conversation before McGonagall had noticed him in the corridor and shut the door. Experiment. You're very quiet, Hermione said. She was sitting next to him at the Gryffindor table, still holding her book. I'm thinking, he said. About? Dumbledore said it was an accident, Harry said. That the soul fragment attached to me accidentally. Yes, she said. Do you believe that? She looked at him. Her brown eyes were sharp and cautious and very intelligent. I don't know enough yet, she said, which was a better answer than yes or no would have been. Neither do I, Harry said. So let's find out. Ron leaned across from Harry's other side with his mouth half full of chicken. Find out how? Library, Harry said. Tomorrow. As early as they'll let us in. I'll write a list tonight, Hermione said, already reaching for her quill. Ron looked between them. He looked slightly overwhelmed and also, beneath that, quietly delighted, the expression of someone who has wandered into something much bigger than they expected and is choosing to find it thrilling rather than terrifying. Right, he said. Library. Yes. Obviously. Harry smiled at his chicken. For the first time since the hat had opened its ancient mouth and detonated the secret of his existence into a great hall full of witnesses, something in his chest settled into something that felt like, forward. Later, after Gryffindor Tower, after Percy Weasley had given them what appeared to be a pre-prepared welcome speech that no one had asked for, after the other first years had either carefully avoided looking at Harry or very carefully tried to look at him normally, which amounted to the same thing, Harry lay in his 4-poster bed in the dark and waited. He didn't know what he was waiting for. He found out quickly. The hum behind his sternum kicked up, slow and strange, and he felt it differently now that he knew what to call it. Less like a tuning fork. More like a voice at the bottom of a very deep well, not words yet, barely even syllables, more like the rhythm and register of speech without its content. A presence. Something with temperature and weight, pressed against the interior of him the way a hand presses against glass. He didn't try to push it away. He lay still and he let it be there and he thought, I know what you are now. The hum shifted. Adjusted. It had a quality of, not surprise, exactly. More like the recalibration of something that had expected to remain unacknowledged. I'm not afraid of you, Harry thought, clearly, deliberately, directly at whatever the fragment was. And I'm not going to pretend you're not there. But you need to understand something. He stared at the dark canopy of his bed. This is my body. My life. My choices. You're a squatter and I know it now, and whatever Dumbledore's plan for you is, for me, I'm making my own plans. So you can be useful or you can be quiet. But you're not running anything. The hum did something that wasn't quite a sound. It was more like the impression of a sound, something vast and cold and very, very old, compressed into the fraction of a soul that occupied the space behind his scar. Not words. Not yet. But an acknowledgement. He was almost certain it was an acknowledgement. He closed his eyes. He slept. He dreamed of a diary. Not clearly, the way dreams aren't clear, edges soft, logic folded in on itself. A black leather diary with no name on the cover and pages that looked wet even though the surface was dry when he touched them. Someone had written in it. The handwriting was elegant and deliberate and he couldn't read it in the dream, couldn't make the letters resolve into words, but he had the feeling of the writing the way you have the feeling of music in a dream, the shape of it without the meaning. He woke at 5:30 in the morning with grey light seeping through the dormitory curtains and the dream already dissolving, and what he held on to was not the diary itself but the feeling that had accompanied it. Something stored. Something kept. The specific feeling of information that someone had decided was too important to be in only one place. He got up. Got dressed. Sat at the small desk by the dormitory window and started writing. He wrote everything he knew. The hat's exact words. Dumbledore's composure. The word experiment overheard through a door. The way Snape had looked at him, not the look of a man discovering something new, but the look of a man watching an expected piece arrive at an expected time. The dream, for what it was worth. He made a list of questions. He underlined 3 of them twice. How long has Dumbledore known? What is his plan for the Horcrux? Can it be removed without killing me? He looked at that last question for a long time. Then he wrote, below it, in smaller letters, he doesn't think so. That's what the composure means. He sat there in that chair with his sherbet lemon and he wasn't afraid because he already knows how this ends. He's known for a long time. And the ending he's planned, he stopped writing. He tapped his quill against the parchment. The ending he's planned doesn't require my survival. It requires my death at the right moment. That's the experiment. That's what I overheard. He folded the parchment and tucked it inside his Transfiguration textbook. He would need more information before he could be sure. But he was, at 11 years old, in the grey pre-dawn light of his first morning at Hogwarts, already quite sure. Outside the window, Hogwarts was waking up. The Olary was stirring, he could hear it, faintly, the shuffle of wings, the soft percussion of 100 birds shifting and resettling. The lake below was silver-grey and motionless. Somewhere in the castle, he imagined Dumbledore was also awake, sitting in his circular office, and he was probably planning, calmly, warmly, with genuine love for Harry Potter and genuine absolute certainty that he knew best, what the next move would be. Harry picked up his quill and added a 4th question to his list. What did the hat mean when it said 52-year Horcrux experiment? He paused. He hadn't heard anyone say that, he realized. Not last night. Not in the room with Dumbledore. Not in the overheard corridor conversation. He hadn't heard anyone say 52 years. He stared at the words. He'd written something he hadn't heard. Something that felt, in the way of the diary dream, less like a memory and more like a transmission. Information that had arrived without a clear sender. His scar was warm. Not burning, warm. The way a held coal is warm before it starts to hurt. He looked at it in the small mirror by the desk, the lightning-shaped mark, red against pale skin, slightly raised at the edges. He'd had it since before he could remember. He'd been told it was a car crash. He'd been told so many things that weren't true that he'd developed, over the years, a specific internal register for truth versus management, and in that register, the number 52 was singing. 52 years. 1943 to 1995. Or 1939 to 1991. Something had started 52 years ago, and whatever it was, Dumbledore was at the center of it, and some part of the thing inside Harry's scar knew it. He wrote, the soul fragment isn't just a passenger. It's a record. He underlined it. Then he got his Hogwarts, a history out of his trunk. Hermione had lent it to him on the train and he'd read enough to know it would be useful, and he started finding everything it said about the founding of the school, about ancient magic, about the nature of souls and anchors and the very oldest spells that bound one living thing to another. The castle woke around him, floor by floor, sound by sound. Harry read. By the time Ron stirred in his bed at 7 and blinked at him with the startled expression of someone who had forgotten overnight that his new friend was a magical anomaly, Harry had 3 pages of notes and the first clear outline of a plan. "You've been up for ages," Ron said, voice thick with sleep. "Yes. You should have slept." "I know. Did you sleep at all?" "A little." Harry looked up from his notes. "Ron. What do you know about Tom Riddle?" Ron sat up straighter. "Voldemort?" "Well, only what everyone knows, basically. Dark wizard. Tried to take over everything. Your parents stopped him. Or, well. You stopped him." "Before that," Harry said. "Before he was Voldemort. When he was still Tom Riddle." Ron frowned. "I don't know. He was a student here, wasn't he?" "Years ago." "He was a student here 50 years ago," Harry said, and then, very carefully, "What was Dumbledore doing 50 years ago?" Ron blinked. I think he was a teacher here. Transfiguration, maybe. Before he was headmaster." "So Dumbledore was here," Harry said, "when Voldemort was a student." "I mean. Probably, more actions request aborted. Write the next chapter now." Chapter 2, The experiment exposed. The library opened at 7:30 and Hermione was waiting outside it at 7:15, which the librarian, Madame Pants, a woman who looked like she'd been preserved in vinegar and was perfectly happy about it, regarded through the door's glass panel with the expression of someone encountering a familiar and not entirely unwelcome problem. Harry and Ron arrived at 7:22. Hermione had a list. It was already 2 pages long. "I started it last night," she said, by way of explanation. "In bed?" Ron said. "By the light of my wand, yes." That's impressive and slightly worrying." "Tom Riddle," Harry said, before they could develop this further. "Hermione, what do you know about him specifically?" "Not Voldemort, Riddle. The student." She'd clearly been thinking about this already, because she answered without pausing. "Tom Marvolo Riddle. Half-blood. Muggle father, magical mother, Mara P. Gaunt, who was descended from Salazar Slytherin. Orphaned very young. Raised at a Muggle orphanage called Wolves. Came to Hogwarts in 1938. Slytherin. Head boy. Outstanding OWLS and NEWTS. Disappeared after school, spent years apparently traveling, then resurfaced as Voldemort sometime in the 1960s. She paused. He opened the Chamber of Secrets during his 5th year. 1942 to 1943. And, Harry said, who was teaching Transfiguration in 1943. Hermione blinked. Dumbledore. Her voice shifted register slightly, the way it did when pieces were clicking. Dumbledore was the Transfiguration teacher. He would have been in his 40s then, roughly. He taught Riddle. He didn't just teach him, Harry said. He watched him. He knew what Riddle was becoming. He's talked about it, I've read some of it in Hogwarts, a history, there's a section on, actually, give me a moment. Madame Pants opened the door at precisely 7:30 and all 3 of them went straight to the back of the library, to the table nearest the window that looked out on the vegetable garden, where the morning light came in flat and grey and useful. Harry already had Hogwarts, a history open. He'd marked the page with a Chudley Cannon's bookmark of Ron's that he'd borrowed without asking and which Ron didn't mind because Ron was beginning to understand that when Harry borrowed something without asking it was because he was already 3 thoughts ahead and the social niceties were collateral. Here, Harry said, turning the book around. Page 412. The section on Notable Headmasters and Their Legacies. Third paragraph under Dumbledore. Hermione read aloud. Dumbledore, appointed headmaster in 1956 following the retirement of headmaster Dippet, is widely credited with transforming Hogwarts' approach to the study of dark arts defense following a decade of curricular lobbying. His early years as Transfiguration professor, from 1938 to 1956, were marked by his distinctive approach to advanced theory, including his significant written correspondence with the then preeminent researcher in magical soul theory, Adalbert Waffling. She looked up. Soul theory. Waffling published Magical Theory in 1942, Harry said. I found that in the index. But there were apparently letters. Correspondence. I want to find those letters. They probably wouldn't be in a school library, Ron said, which was a more useful observation than his tone of bewildered helpfulness suggested. If they're private correspondence, they'd be archived, right? Or in a private collection. Or in Dumbledore's office, Harry said. The three of them looked at each other. We've been at school for one night, Ron said. I know. We're 11. Also yes. Ron leaned back in his chair with the expression of a man rapidly adjusting his sense of what was normal. Right, he said. How do we get into Dumbledore's office? We don't, Harry said. Not yet. First we understand enough that when we do get in, we know what we're looking at. He pulled out his 4 questions and smoothed them on the table. Hermione read them. Her face, reading, did interesting things, quick precise calculations visible as small movements around her eyes and mouth. When she got to the last item, the soul fragment isn't just a passenger. It's a record, she looked up. Explain that, she said. I knew the number 52 this morning, Harry said. I wrote it down before I knew why I knew it. And it fits. 1943 is when Riddle created his first Horcrux. The Chamber of Secrets incident. Whatever he did that year, in the course of it, he made something. Anchored a fragment of himself somewhere. A diary, Hermione said, slowly. Harry went still. What? There's a reference. She was pulling books from the stack she'd already assembled, flipping through indices with the speed of someone who reads indexes for pleasure. Here. Secrets of the Darkest Art. It's from the restricted section, but you have a note from McGonagall. She showed him the signed permission slip McGonagall had pressed into his hand last night with the expression of someone handing over a weapon and hoping for the best. There's a reference in the restricted section catalog to a book called The Residual Soul, a study of persistent magical consciousness. Published 1947. 4 years after the chamber incident. Who published it? She scanned the page. Anonymous. But the publisher was a magical imprint connected to, she ran her finger along a footnote. Connected to the correspondence of Adalbert Waffling. Who Dumbledore was writing to in 1942, Harry said. In 1942, Hermione confirmed, and now her voice had the quality it would maintain for years whenever a particularly elegant and troubling piece of evidence revealed itself, precise, excited, and slightly furious, in the way people get furious when a puzzle that should have been impossible turns out to have a neat and horrible solution. Ron, who had been following this with the focused attention of someone watching an extremely fast card trick, said, so Dumbledore knew about Horcruxes, specifically, soul theory related to Horcruxes, from at least 1942. Which is when Riddle was his student. Which is 1 year before the Chamber of Secrets opened. And, Harry said, whatever Riddle did when he opened the chamber, whatever Horcrux he created that year, Dumbledore either witnessed it directly or deduced it immediately afterward. Because 4 years later, an anonymous book about persistent magical consciousness turns up through Waffling's publisher, and Dumbledore has been corresponding with Waffling since at least 1942. The library settled around them. Somewhere in the stacks, a book reshelved itself with a soft thud. 52 years, Hermione said. From 1943 to 1995. 1995 isn't here yet, Harry said. We're in 1991. Which means, she said carefully, we're in the middle of it. They spent 4 hours in the library. Madame Pants brought them a disapproving cup of tea at 10 o'clock and said nothing about it, which Harry interpreted as the librarian's version of respect. By noon they had a map of sorts, not a physical map but a chronological one, a timeline of what they could verify against what they could only suspect, and it went like this: 1938, Tom Riddle arrives at Hogwarts. Dumbledore, already Transfiguration teacher, begins corresponding with Adalbert waffling on the subject of magical soul theory. 1942, the correspondence intensifies. Waffling's notes, referenced in a biography of him published in 1960, which Hermione found with the specific glee of someone who reads biographies for fun, describe an unnamed colleague at a prominent magical institution, raising theoretical questions about the architecture of a soul under conditions of deliberate fracture. 1943, the Chamber of Secrets incident. A student dies, a girl named Moaning Myrtle, as it turns out, killed by the basilisk. Riddle creates his first Horcrux anchored in a blank diary. The chamber is closed. Riddle, about to be expelled, frames Hagrid. Dumbledore, crucially, records show, advocates for Riddle's innocence. Not Hagrid's innocence. Riddle's. He knew, Harry said, staring at this particular piece of the timeline. He advocated for keeping Riddle in the school knowing he was a murderer. Knowing he'd made a Horcrux. Why? Ron said. Because you can't study something after it's left, Harry said. Ron absorbed this. He kept a dark wizard in the school to study him. I think he was trying to understand how to stop him, Hermione said, and her voice had the quality of someone defending a position they don't entirely believe. Eventually. Long term. Maybe, Harry said. Or he was trying to understand how to use the information. He looked at his notes. Either way, he spent the next 50 years learning everything there was to know about Horcruxes. And at some point in those 50 years, he worked out that I was one. And he didn't tell you, Ron said. He was going to, Harry said. At some point. When it served the plan. He tapped his quill on the table. The plan where I die. The word sat on the table between them. Hermione opened her mouth and closed it. Ron, to his credit, didn't try to immediately correct the word or soften it. You think that's what it is, Hermione said finally. You think he knows the Horcrux can only be destroyed by the death of the vessel, Harry said. Yes. You don't know that. No, he agreed. I don't. Yet. He picked up Secrets of the Darkest Art and turned to the section on soul anchoring. By the time the morning's first classes would have been ending, Harry had a dim awareness that they'd missed Transfiguration and Herbology and was choosing not to care about that yet. He'd read 3 chapters on Horcrux theory and had the beginning of the answer. Not the full answer. The beginning. A Horcrux, Secrets of the Darkest Art explained in the bloodless tones of purely academic dark magic, was in essence an argument with death. The creator split their soul, hid a piece in a vessel, and thus ensured that even if their body was destroyed, the soul fragment persisted and could be used as a tether to pull them back. The vessel could be anything, an object, an animal, theoretically a person, though this was noted as extraordinarily difficult to achieve deliberately and essentially unheard of accidentally. Essentially unheard of. The destruction of a Horcrux required the destruction of the vessel, completely, beyond magical repair. For objects, this meant something that could not be mended, basilisk venom, fiend fire, a handful of other substances so corrosive they consumed even magical bonds. For living vessels, the text grew suddenly delicate and circumspect in the way academic texts go delicate when they're skating past something they find uncomfortable, and the relevant paragraph read, in full, the theoretical framework for a Horcrux anchored within a living vessel presents unique complications. The soul fragment, unlike in inanimate objects, exists in a state of continuous metabolic interaction with its host. This renders standard destruction methods impossible without harm to the host. The fragment becomes, in a meaningful sense, integrated. The question of whether a living Horcrux can be separated from its host without the host's death remains, at the time of this writing, an open one, as no documented case of a successful living vessel Horcrux has been confirmed. Harry read this 3 times. Open question, he said. As of when that was written, Hermione said. When was it written? She checked. 1958, 15 years after 1943, Harry said. Dumbledore has had 33 more years of research since then. We need to know what he's concluded, Hermione said. His current working theory on extraction. Yes, Harry said. Which is in his office. His notes, his research, whatever he's accumulated over 52 years of studying this. He closed the book. Which means we need to get into his office. How? Ron said. Legitimately, Harry said. He invited me to talk to him. He'll invite me again. He's going to want to manage this very carefully, and that means keeping me close. He stood up and stretched. So I'll let him keep me close. And while I'm there, I'll find what I need. Ron looked at him thoughtfully. You're not 11, are you? He said. Like, physically you are. But you're not. I've had practice, Harry said, at adults telling me things that aren't true. The invitation came that afternoon, as expected, a note carried by a school owl, sealed with the Hogwarts crest, in handwriting that was beautiful and decisive in the way of someone who has been writing for 110 years and has achieved a definitive style. Harry, please come to my office this evening after dinner. 7 o'clock suits, if it suits you. The "if it suits you" was deliberate. It was an act of good manners, and it also created the impression of choice where none existed. It suits me, Harry wrote back. I'll bring my research questions, if that's all right. He got a reply 20 minutes later, of course. Bring whatever you like. He tucked the note away and went to Charms, where Flitwick had clearly decided that the most professional response to the morning's revelation was to teach the class exactly as planned and address any lingering student shock through the cathartic medium of the levitation charm. Harry liked Flitwick immediately. He liked the pragmatism of it. Wingardium Leviosa, Flitwick said, demonstrating with a feather on his desk, which rose in a lazy spiral. The key, as with many first-year charms, is the wrist. Swish and flick. The movement generates the intention and the intention generates the effect. Magic is fundamentally communicative, you are asking the object to do something. You must make the request precisely. He beamed at the class. Now then, everyone choose a partner. Harry partnered with Ron, which was the natural choice. Ron's first attempt launched the feather sideways into Seamus's ear. Harry's first attempt lifted the feather, held it steady at shoulder height for 4 seconds, and then, almost experimentally, moved it in a slow horizontal arc across the width of the desk. Flitwick stopped talking mid-sentence. The feather hovered. Mr. Potter, Flitwick said carefully. Has anyone worked with you on wand work before? No, Harry said. Is something wrong? Not at all. Flitwick's small face wore a very complex expression. Not at all. Please continue. Harry set the feather down gently and tried to decide whether what he just felt, the ease of it, the way the magic had responded not just to the wand movement but to something underneath the movement, something like intention with weight, was his, or whether it was coming from the presence behind his scar. He repeated the charm. The feather rose. He decided it didn't matter. It was in him. All of it was in him. The origin was a question for later. Ron was watching him with undisguised impressed surprise. You're really good at that. Apparently, Harry said. Do you think that's the, don't know, Harry said. Does it matter? Ron thought about it. Suppose not, he said. Then, can you help me with mine? My feather keeps going horizontal. Wrist up on the swish, Harry said. Less like you're swatting something, more like you're asking. Ron tried it. The feather went up. Ron's face broke into a grin so wide and uncomplicated that Harry felt something loosen in his chest that he hadn't known was tight. Dinner was loud and strange in the way of a school still processing a collective shock. Harry ate, listened, and catalogued. The Gryffindor table had divided itself into those who wanted to talk about what the Sorting Hat had said and those who were performing a very deliberate normalcy about it. Percy Weasley was in the latter camp and was eating his shepherd's pie with the focused concentration of someone pretending nothing had happened. Several fourth years kept glancing down the table at Harry in ways they thought were subtle. At the staff table, Dumbledore was talking to McGonagall in a low and apparently comfortable voice. McGonagall was not comfortable, her posture was the posture of someone maintaining correct behavior in an incorrect situation. Snape was eating nothing and watching Harry with the predatory focus of a chess player watching an opponent make a move that doesn't fit the expected pattern. Harry met Snape's eyes. He didn't look away. Snape looked away first, which surprised Harry and which he thought about for the rest of dinner. Dumbledore's office was exactly what it should have been, circular, warm, crowded with evidence of a very long and very full life. Portraits of previous headmasters dozed in their frames. An aged phoenix, magnificent and moth-eaten in equal measure, sat on a perch near the window. The desk was large enough to serve as a landing pad for something substantial and covered in papers with the organized disorder of someone who knows exactly where everything is. Harry stood in the center of the room and looked at all of it and thought, somewhere in here. Harry. Dumbledore came in from a side door Harry hadn't noticed, carrying 2 cups of tea. He set them on the desk and gestured to the chair across from it. Sit, please. How was your first full day? Good, Harry said, sitting. Charms was particularly interesting. I heard. Dumbledore settled into his own chair. His eyes, over the half-moon spectacles, were doing their particular thing, warm and deep and measuring, simultaneously the eyes of a grandfather and the eyes of something much older than any grandfather. Professor Flitwick tells me your wand work is extraordinary for a first-day student. I've been told I have a natural aptitude, Harry said pleasantly. Ollivander made quite a fuss about my wand. Holly and phoenix feather. He paused. Do you know whose feather? Fawkes, Dumbledore said, and glanced at the phoenix on the perch with a fondness that was entirely genuine. As it happens. Same phoenix gave a feather to Voldemort's wand, Harry said. Yes. Connected, Harry said. Yes. Like me and him, Harry said. Also connected. Dumbledore inclined his head. Indeed. Except, Harry said, picking up his tea, a wand connection just means the wands share a maker. The connection between me and Voldemort is older than that and goes in one direction. His soul is in me. My soul isn't in him. He took a sip. Which means the connection you're studying, the one you've been studying for quite some time, is specifically about what his fragment does to me. What it makes me capable of. He set the cup down. What it makes me useful for. Dumbledore was quiet. Outside the window, the grounds were dark and the lake was invisible. You've been busy, Dumbledore said mildly. I've been in the library, Harry said. I have good friends. Miss Granger and young Mr. Weasley, Dumbledore said. Yes. I imagine they're both formidable, in their ways. Dumbledore, Harry said, and he used the name without the title deliberately, not as a challenge exactly, but as a level. We are having a conversation between people, not a lesson between professor and student. How many Horcruxes has Voldemort made? A beat. We believe, Dumbledore began. How many do you know about? Harry said. Specifically. With evidence. The fire crackled. Fawkes rearranged one wing. I know of one with certainty, Dumbledore said. The diary riddle created in 1943. I have strong suspicions about others, possibly several others. Tom Riddle was not a man to do anything by halves. How many others? Harry said. Your best theory. 6, Dumbledore said, after the smallest pause. Including me, Harry said. The diary plus 5 deliberate creations plus yourself would make 7, Dumbledore said, and the precision of would make rather than makes did not escape Harry. 7 is a significant number in magical theory. The most powerfully magical number. Tom would have considered it important. But he didn't plan me, Harry said. I was an accident. Correct. Which means, Harry said, if he was aiming for 7, I'm extra. I'm number 8. He watched Dumbledore's face. Which means even if I'm destroyed, he still has 6 others keeping him alive. Yes, Dumbledore said. He said it simply, without deflection, and Harry appreciated that, at least. And your plan, Harry said, is to find and destroy the 6, and then destroy me, or allow me to be destroyed, which destroys the last fragment. The accident fragment. And kills him. The fire. The portraits. Fawkes, who had gone very still. My plan, Dumbledore said, carefully, is considerably more nuanced than, is that the end of it? Harry said. Yes or no? Is my death in the plan? Dumbledore looked at him for a long moment. His eyes, over those spectacles, were doing something Harry hadn't seen them do yet, something that was not management or performance but something genuinely pained. In one version of the path forward, he said, very quietly. In one version. Yes. Harry nodded. He'd known. He'd known since the sherbet lemon, but knowing and hearing confirmed were different weights. I'm not going to do that, Harry said. Just so we're clear. Harry, I understand your reasoning, Harry said. I've read enough of the theory to understand it. And I understand that you've been working on this for 50 years, he watched the slight shift in Dumbledore's face at the number and pressed on, and that your strategy is built around what you believe is the only viable path. But the question of whether the Horcrux can be extracted without killing the vessel is still theoretically open. You told me yourself that soul theory is complex. There's a book published in 1958 that describes it as an open question. And that was 33 years ago. So I want to know what you've concluded since then. Dumbledore was looking at him the way McGonagall had looked at him last night, that precise recalibration, the revision of an expectation mid-motion. You've had one day, he said, not accusatorially. Almost with wonder. I started early, Harry said. What's your current theoretical framework on extraction? A long silence. Outside, an owl crossed the window, silhouetted a moment against a purple sky, then gone. Sit with me, Dumbledore said, and gestured to the chairs by the fire. They moved. Fawkes made a low sound, something between a trill and a sigh. What I have believed, Dumbledore said, slowly, with the weight of a man lifting something heavy, for most of the past 20 years, is that extraction is not possible. That the fragment is too integrated, metabolically, as the text you likely found puts it, to be separated without destroying the vessel. He looked at Harry. You. And before 20 years ago, Harry said. Before 20 years ago, Dumbledore said, I believed it was possible. I spent the better part of the 1950s and 1960s attempting to theorize a method. Several methods. He paused. I failed. The magic required would be, he searched for the word. Intimate. Old. The kind of magic that cannot be generated in a laboratory. It requires conditions that are essentially impossible to manufacture. What conditions? Harry said. A complete and voluntary severing of attachment, Dumbledore said. From both sides. The host must choose, entirely freely, without coercion, to release the fragment. And the fragment must, in some meaningful sense, choose to be released. He looked at Harry with those deep, pained eyes. A fragment of Voldemort's soul choosing to do anything except endure is not something I have been able to imagine. After a certain point. I stopped trying. But you haven't looked at it from my side, Harry said. What it means for the fragment to be inside me. What contact with my consciousness, my choices, my experience, does to a fragment of soul that expected to be anchored in an object. Dumbledore's lips parted slightly. Not with surprise, something more like the recognition of a thought he'd pushed aside encountering someone who had picked it back up. "I had a dream last night," Harry said. "About a diary. I knew the number 52 this morning before I had a reason to know it. The fragment isn't passive, Dumbledore. It's transmitting. And if it can transmit to me," he looked at the fire, "then it can also receive." The silence was different now. It had texture. "You're suggesting," Dumbledore said slowly, "a dialogue." "I'm suggesting," Harry said, "that before you decide I have to die for your plan to work, you let me try something that you stopped believing in because you couldn't generate the right conditions in a laboratory." He looked at Dumbledore directly. "I am the conditions. I've been living with this thing for 10 years. It knows me. It's been shaped by me, the same way I've been shaped by it." He paused. "I'm not asking your permission. I'm informing you of what I'm going to do. I thought you deserved to know." Another silence. Longer. "You're 11 years old," Dumbledore said, but he said it without its usual weight, without the full deployment of that particular adult defense. "Yes," Harry said. "And I have a soul fragment that's been soaking in 20 years of my particular personality." He almost smiled. "Whatever Voldemort was at the start of this, Professor, whatever he put into me, it's been living in a cupboard under the stairs for a decade. I suspect it's changed." Fawkes made his sound again, trill and sigh, something genuinely musical, and Dumbledore looked at the bird for a long moment. "I have notes," Dumbledore said finally. "Research. The accumulation of 52 years of theory." He paused. "Most of it I would not share easily." "I know," Harry said. "But some of it," Dumbledore said, "pertains to the architecture of a living Horcrux. Its relationship to the host. The conditions for voluntary extraction, theoretical as they remain." He looked at Harry. "Some of that, you should have." "Yes," Harry said. "I should." Dumbledore stood, crossed to his desk, opened a drawer, and removed a small pensieve, silver blue and quietly luminous, the size of a large mixing bowl. He set it between them. "I am going to show you something," he said, "that I have shown no one. Because you have earned it by being precisely the person you are, rather than the person I expected." He paused. "And because you are right that you deserve to know." He raised his wand to his temple, and drew out a long silver thread of memory, and lowered it into the pensive surface, which shivered and went still. "This is the memory of the conversation in which I first confirmed my theory that a living Horcrux had been created the night your parents died," Dumbledore said. "It is from November 1981. You were 15 months old." Harry stood. He looked into the pensieve. "15 months, he said quietly. "You've known for 10 years. "Yes," Dumbledore said. "Not several years," Harry said. 10. "No," Dumbledore said, and the word was almost inaudible. "Not several years." Harry looked at him. Dumbledore looked back. Between them the pensieve glowed, holding the memory of a decision made 10 years ago in a private room, a decision that had shaped every year of Harry's life at the Dursleys, every locked cupboard, every cold winter, every birthday ignored, not by accident, but by the careful, loving, terrible hand of a man who had decided that a child shaped by hardship would be easier to guide toward a necessary death than a child shaped by joy. Harry didn't say any of that. He said, "I'd like to see the memory now, please." And he stepped into the pensieve. The memory was a room in Hogwarts, the headmaster's office, but different, a different configuration of the same circular space, 1981's version, and Dumbledore was younger in it, though not by as much as Harry would have expected, sitting across from a woman Harry didn't recognize. She was perhaps 60, with silver hair and the ink-stained hands of someone who wrote constantly, and she had the specific carriage of a person who has just delivered very bad news and is watching how it lands. "It's confirmed, then," the memory Dumbledore said. He looked the same. He always looked the same. The diagnostic was unambiguous, the woman said. The child is carrying a fragment. A full soul shard, not a fragment of a fragment, not a trace. A complete piece of Riddle's soul, anchored at the scar. She paused. Albus. The child is alive. Yes, Memory Dumbledore said. Which means we cannot, no, Memory Dumbledore said. Not yet. Not until the others are found. He folded his hands. He must be allowed to live until the time is right. Allowed. Harry, standing in the memory, heard it clearly. Allowed to live. Like it was a permission granted by Dumbledore rather than a natural state of being. And the extraction question, the woman said. Still open, theoretically, Memory Dumbledore said. But I've been unable to find a practical path forward. If one exists, it would require voluntary release from both parties, she said. Yes. I've read your notes. She looked at him with something between respect and unease. Albus. He's 15 months old. If there were ever a chance of a genuine voluntary relationship developing between the fragment and the host, we cannot risk that, Memory Dumbledore said, calmly. If the fragment develops too strong a bond with the host, if the host becomes, in a meaningful sense, the fragment's primary point of attachment, we cannot predict the consequences. The fragment must remain ancillary. Manageable. You're going to keep the child in an environment that prevents deep attachment, the woman said, very quietly. So that you can destroy him cleanly when the time comes. Silence. I am going to keep the child in an environment that is safe, Memory Dumbledore said, and the word safe did an enormous amount of work, and from which I can monitor the situation carefully. The Dursleys, the woman said. The blood protection is genuine, Memory Dumbledore said. Lily's sacrifice created a genuine shield. The Dursley household is defensible. It is a great many things, the woman said, and stood, and put on her coat. I hope you're right, Albus. About all of it. I hope the calculation is correct. She paused at the door. Because if it isn't, if the child turns out to be more than your equation accounts for, you will have spent 10 years preparing a very unpleasant surprise for yourself. The memory dissolved. Harry came out of the pensive the way you come out of cold water, sharply, suddenly, all at once aware of the temperature of the air. He stood in Dumbledore's office and looked at his hands for a moment. They were steady. Dumbledore was watching him from across the desk. His face was open in a way Harry had not yet seen from him, stripped back, the warm management and careful gentleness set aside, showing something older and more tired and genuinely uncertain. The woman, Harry said. Who was she? A colleague, Dumbledore said. An expert in soul theory. She died in 1986. What was her name? Bathsheba Babbling. Harry filed this. She told you in 1981, he said. Yes. And you put me with the Dursleys to prevent attachment. To keep me manageable. Dumbledore didn't answer. He didn't have to. I want to be very clear about something, Harry said, and his voice was even and deliberate and carried nothing sharp in it, no trembling, no performing of anger. He was simply stating a fact. I understand why you made that choice. I understand your reasoning. I even understand that you believe it was the best available option. He looked at Dumbledore steadily. But it's over. The variables have changed. I know what I am. I know what you've planned. And I am telling you now, as clearly as I can, that I am going to solve this problem in a way that doesn't end with my death. And I would prefer your help in doing it. But I don't require it. A very long silence. No, Dumbledore said, at last. I don't suppose you do. He stood, slowly. He looked like what he was, very old, very tired, carrying 52 years of a secret that had shaped itself into a plan that shaped itself into a child's life, all of it built on the bedrock certainty that he was the one person capable of seeing the whole picture. And here was Harry, 11 years old, already reading the picture from the inside, and the look on Dumbledore's face was the look of someone who has been the smartest person in every room for 70 years encountering, possibly for the first time, a room where that wasn't straightforwardly true. "I'll give you access to my research," Dumbledore said. "The relevant portions. Extraction theory. Soul architecture. The relationship between host and fragment under conditions of prolonged cohabitation." He paused. "It is substantial. It will take time." "I have time," Harry said. "Assuming your plan stays on ice." Dumbledore looked at him for one more moment. Then, very unexpectedly, he almost smiled. Not the warm managed smile. Something smaller and truer. "Babbling told me, that day in 1981, that if she were wrong about the extraction impossibility, I would have prepared a very unpleasant surprise for myself." He looked at Harry. "I think she meant you." "Tell her she was right," Harry said. "I can't, unfortunately," Dumbledore said. "She died." "Then I'll tell her myself," Harry said. "When I solve it." He picked up his bag, said good night, and left the office. Behind him, Fawkes sang, a single, clear note that followed him halfway down the spiral staircase before it faded into the stones of the castle, absorbed by 1,000 years of accumulated magic, and was gone. Chapter 3, The Soul Fragment speaks 3 weeks into term and Harry had developed a reputation that he hadn't asked for and didn't particularly mind. It wasn't the boy who lived reputation, that one had arrived pre-installed, like a piece of furniture someone else had chosen. The new one was different, built from observation. It was the reputation of someone who knew things he shouldn't know yet, who performed magic with an ease that unsettled teachers who'd been watching 11-year-olds struggle with it for decades, and who had a quality in his green eyes that several older students described, in various ways, as, not quite right for his age. Neville Longbottom, who had very good instincts about people, said Harry reminded him of someone who had already lived through a thing and was now living through it again, the second time. Dean Thomas said Harry reminded him of his uncle, who'd been in the army, which everyone agreed was a strange comparison but which nobody could quite argue with. Harry didn't pay much attention to any of it. He was busy. The research Dumbledore had provided came in installments, not all at once, which Harry had expected, because Dumbledore giving anyone his full hand immediately was something that simply wasn't in the man's nature. It came in the form of annotated essays, some handwritten in Dumbledore's elegant script and some typed in the style of an earlier decade, all of them delivered to Harry's dormitory room by a school owl with a covering note that said things like "I thought this chapter might be relevant to your current thinking," and the footnote on page 47 addresses the counterargument you raised on Tuesday. It was, Harry decided, Dumbledore's version of collaboration, careful, curated, incomplete, but genuinely useful. The footnote on page 47 addressed the question of whether a soul fragment could, under the right conditions, develop independent emotional responses to its host's experiences. The conclusion, tentative and hedged in 3 layers of academic qualification, was, possibly yes, but the mechanisms are poorly understood and the conditions required for such a development to occur have never been systematically studied. Harry read this and thought, I am the systematic study. He'd started keeping a second journal. Not the list of questions he'd written that first morning, that was still in his Transfiguration textbook, updated daily now with new entries. This was different. It was a record of the fragment's activity. What he noticed, when he noticed it, what seemed to trigger it. The triggers were clearer than he'd expected. It was a Tuesday morning in the 3rd week, Transfiguration, and McGonagall was demonstrating the matchstick-to-needle transformation with the crisp precision of someone for whom elegance is not an aesthetic choice but a professional standard. Harry was watching her wand work, the specific angle of the cast, the pause between the movement and the word, when the hum kicked in, low and lateral, and with it came a piece of knowledge that wasn't memory exactly. More like a recognition. The feeling of having solved this problem before, in a different body, with different hands, and finding it trivially simple. He'd felt it in charms. He'd felt it in the levitation charm when the feather had moved with no resistance. He'd felt it twice in defense against the dark arts, where Quirrell's stuttering, fragrant explanations of basic protective theory were accompanied by an internal voice, not words, just a directional pressure, that kept orienting him toward the gaps in Quirrell's knowledge, the places where the theory frayed. Here, the presence said, in the language of feeling rather than speech. This is where it breaks down. This is where he's wrong. He'd written these down. Fragment activates in proximity to magic being done incorrectly. Has strong aesthetic response to precision. Aesthetic disgust at sloppiness. Fragment activates in proximity to Quirrell specifically. He'd written that one with a particular emphasis, underlined twice. He didn't know what it meant yet. He had a theory. McGonagall's matchstick became a needle, perfectly formed, gleaming, with a quality of silver exactitude that Harry recognized as the thing the presence found satisfying in its cold, structural way. He made his own matchstick into a needle on the first try. His was slightly sharper at the point. He wasn't sure if that was himself or the fragment, and he'd stopped trying to determine the source for individual magical outcomes because the boundary was, as the hat had said, very hard to locate. "Mr. Potter," McGonagall said, holding his needle up to the light. Her voice was carefully neutral, which with McGonagall was itself a significant register. "Again, please. Slower." He did it again. Slower. The matchstick became a needle with a visible progression, wood softening, color draining to silver, tip sharpening, instead of the instantaneous snap of the first attempt. "Thank you," McGonagall said, and set it down, and looked at him for a moment with something professionally measured and personally something else. Then she moved on. Ron, next to him, was quietly wrestling his matchstick into something that was needle-adjacent at best. The wood had gone silver, but the tip was blunt and it still smelled of sulfur. "How do you do that?" he said, without looking up. "Every single time." "I'm not sure," Harry said honestly. "Is it the—" Ron glanced sideways, lowered his voice. "The thing?" "Possibly," Harry said. "I've been trying to work out where I end and it begins. It's difficult." "Are you scared?" Ron said. "Of it?" Harry thought about this genuinely, not as a performance of courage. He looked inward at the hum. It was always there, the way background noise is always there, present but ignorable when nothing was activating it. Right now it was quiet, running at baseline. "No," he said. "Not of it." "Of what, then?" "Of Dumbledore's plan being right," Harry said. "Of the extraction being impossible. That's the thing worth being scared of." Ron nodded slowly. "So we make sure it's possible." "Yes." Ron's matchstick made a sound like a small correction and became a needle. Still blunt, but definitively a needle. Ron stared at it. Did I just, you were thinking about something real," Harry said. "Instead of about the spell. That's what it needed." Ron looked at the needle and then at Harry. "You'd make an excellent transfiguration teacher," he said. "It's a bit annoying." The dream came back. Not every night, more like every third or fourth night, when something in the day had stirred the presence more than usual. The diary dream. He knew by now that it was a real memory, not his own, pressed into the architecture of his sleeping mind by the fragment the way a watermark is pressed into paper, invisible in daylight, visible when held to the light. The diary was a real object. It existed somewhere. It was black, leather-bound, blank on the cover, and the pages inside had a specific quality that the dream conveyed as hungry, a word Harry had written in his journal and drawn a box around, because a diary whose pages were hungry was a Horcrux, and a Horcrux was the thing the fragment inside him recognized because it was the same kind of thing, made in the same moment, by the same hand. He wrote in his journal, "The fragment recognizes the diary. It has a relationship with it. They were made simultaneously, or the diary was made first, and the fragment that's in me was the second fracture. Either way, connection. Question: if I can feel the diary's existence through the fragment, can I locate it? Question: does Dumbledore know the diary exists? He was almost certain Dumbledore knew. He was less certain whether Dumbledore had located it. The third week's Friday morning he went down to breakfast early, before the hall filled up, and sat with Ron and Hermione in the quiet of the nearly empty Gryffindor table with a cup of tea and his journal open and told them about the diary. Hermione immediately produced 2 books and a piece of parchment, which was so predictable it was almost comforting. If the diary is a Horcrux, she said, it would have been created in 1943. Riddle was 16. He'd have needed to commit a murder to split his soul, Myrtle. And then he'd have anchored the fragment in the diary and needed to preserve it. She was already writing. Where is it now? I don't know, Harry said. But the fragment does. Or knows something about it. It keeps showing it to me in the dreams. Why? Ron said. Harry looked at his tea. I think, he said carefully, it's because the fragment in me and the fragment in the diary have a kind of kinship. Same source, same moment, same maker. And the one in me has been inside someone who thinks for 10 years. He paused. I think it might be trying to tell me something. What does a piece of Voldemort's soul want to tell you? Ron said, not unkindly, just genuinely uncertain. I'm not sure, Harry said. But whatever it wants to communicate, it keeps showing me the diary. And diaries can be written in. He looked at them both. What if I wrote to it? A beat. You want to write in Voldemort's diary, Hermione said. If I can find it. Harry, she said, with the tone of someone who has thought 5 steps further already and is selecting which ones to mention first. If the diary is a Horcrux, it won't just sit there and receive a letter. It'll respond. It'll be active. Riddle put himself in that diary. Writing in it would be like, talking to him. 16-year-old him, Harry said. A fragment of him, same as me. Except his fragment has been in an object for 50 years with nothing to shape it. And yours has been in a person, Hermione said slowly. For 10 years, Harry said. Living a life. Having opinions. Developing, whatever it's developed. He closed his journal. I want to know what the difference is. Between a fragment that's been in a person and a fragment that's been in a diary in a dark room for 50 years. They were quiet for a moment. That's either brilliant or catastrophically dangerous, Hermione said. Both, Harry said. Most useful things are. The second major thing that happened in the third week was Snape. It had been building since the sorting, since Snape's particular quality of attention during the Great Hall chaos, the way he'd looked at Harry not with shock but with the recalibrating focus of a man watching an expected variable arrive. In class, Snape taught potions with the theatrical flair of someone who both genuinely loved the subject and understood that intimidation was an excellent pedagogical tool for certain kinds of students. Harry was not one of those students. He found Snape's dramatics interesting. He paid close attention. He found potions genuinely beautiful in the way of chemistry, precise, logical, consequential, and the presence behind his scar had, interestingly, no particular opinions about potions one way or the other, which meant everything Harry did in potions class was purely his own. Which made his performance in potions meaningful in a way his transfiguration performance wasn't, and which Snape had clearly noticed and was clearly annoyed by, because Snape was the kind of teacher who manages his expectations carefully and Harry had disrupted his expectations for the category of Potter. The confrontation came on Friday afternoon, end of the third week. Everyone else had left. Harry was cleaning his workstation with more thoroughness than strictly required because he'd spilled a small amount of Bulbadox powder and it needed careful removal. Potter, Snape said, from the front of the room. He hadn't moved to leave. He was standing at his own desk with the stillness of someone who has been waiting for a room to empty. Professor, Harry said. Stay. Harry stayed. He capped his jar of cleaning solution and turned around. Snape was looking at him with those unreadable dark eyes and his hands folded behind his back and the particular quality of presence he had, compressed and precise and containing something that never quite surfaced but could always be felt pressing against the surface from inside. Like the lake, Harry thought. The lake looked flat. The lake contained a giant squid. You've been spending your evenings in the restricted section, Snape said. I have permission, Harry said. I know you have permission. I'm not questioning the permission. I'm questioning the specific texts. He paused. You've pulled the shelf on Soul Theory 3 times this week. Harry looked at him levelly. Yes. And you've been having private meetings with the headmaster. Yes. And, Snape said, his voice dropping half a register, you left his office 2 weeks ago at 9:47 in the evening, and whatever was discussed in that office has not been shared with the rest of the staff. It's a private conversation, Harry said. Between me and Dumbledore. I am aware of that, Snape said, and something moved in his face, quick and controlled and put back immediately, but Harry caught it. Not anger. Something more like, being excluded from something he considers his right to know. What I am telling you, Potter, is that Dumbledore's judgment, in matters pertaining to your situation, cannot be taken as unconditionally reliable. Harry was quiet for a moment. He looked at Snape carefully. You knew, he said. Snape said nothing. Before the sorting, Harry said. You already knew about the Horcrux. A very long pause. I suspected, Snape said. Since when? The dark eyes held his. Long enough. Dumbledore told you, Harry said, and then revised, no. He didn't tell you. You worked it out. You're smart enough to work it out, and you worked it out from watching him, watching his research, watching his choices, watching what he kept close and what he kept quiet. Snape's expression was an extraordinary thing, the expression of someone who is being accurately read at high speed by an 11-year-old and is choosing between finding it insulting and finding it remarkable. He chose, apparently, something between the two. Your parents were I knew your parents, he said. Your mother, specifically. After she died. After she was killed. I had reason to study the magical architecture of what happened that night. Harry registered the word parents and the specific quality of the pause before killed and the word mother specifically, and the combination of these things said something significant. He tucked it away for later. Not for now. Now was about the present conversation. What do you know about the diary? Harry said. Snape blinked. One controlled, involuntary blink. What diary? Riddle's diary. 1943, black leather, no name. He watched Snape's face. You know about it. Where did you hear about that? Snape said, with a quietness that was not quiet at all. I didn't hear it, Harry said. I dreamed it. 3 times in the last 2 weeks. He held Snape's gaze. The fragment shows it to me. In my sleep. I don't know why yet. Snape was very still. It exists, Harry said. You know it exists. Which means you know more about Dumbledore's research than he's told me, and you've been deciding, for how long, what to do with that knowledge. Potter, Snape said, and his voice was controlled in the specific way of a man who is angry at a situation rather than at a person and is being precise about the distinction. What I know about Dumbledore's research is not something I will discuss with you in a dungeon on a Friday afternoon. Where will you discuss it? Harry said. Another long pause. Snape looked at him with something that was not warmth, would never be warmth, Harry suspected, not quite, but was, underneath the armor of composure and academic authority and whatever old grief was pressing up against the surface, a species of genuine investment. He cared about this. About what happened to Harry. Not in Dumbledore's way, not the careful loving terrible management of a useful piece. Something sharper and more uncomfortable and more real. I teach a clemency, Snape said, finally. Advanced. It is not offered as a regular subject. It requires specific authorization. He paused. The skill of closing one's mind, of constructing interior barriers, would be relevant to your situation. To the management of the connection you have with the fragment. You want to help me build walls against it, Harry said. Against the fragment leaking into your conscious experience at inopportune moments, Snape said. Against Voldemort, should he ever regain a body, accessing your mind through the fragment. Against your own impulses blurring with his in moments of strong emotion. He paused. It is not optional, in my professional assessment. It is urgent. I'll do a clemency, Harry said. If you answer one question. Snape's jaw tightened slightly. You don't negotiate with teachers, Potter. Usually not, Harry agreed. But this is unusual. And you came to me, not the other way around. He waited. One question. Then a clemency. A beat. Snape inclined his head by approximately 2 millimeters, which Harry interpreted as yes. The diary, Harry said. Do you know where it is? Silence. No, Snape said. Not precisely. I know who last had it. He looked at Harry steadily. A man named Lucius Malfoy. Harry looked at him. Draco's father. The boy who'd sat at the sorting and had the hat on his head for a half-second before it yelled Slytherin. Malfoy's father had Riddle's diary. Thank you, Harry said. A clemency begins Monday, Snape said. 7 in the evening. My office. Do not be late. I won't, Harry said, picked up his bag, and left. The weekend arrived with an autumn storm that drove rain sideways against the castle windows and gave the library a feeling of warm enclosed urgency that Hermione found deeply satisfying and Ron found tolerable because Harry had bought him an enormous bag of chocolate frogs from his Gringotts Gold without making any kind of significant event of it. They spread out at their usual table. Harry put his journal in the center. All right, he said. Here's what I know that I didn't know 2 weeks ago. He talked for 20 minutes. The diary. Snape's confirmation of its existence. Lucius Malfoy's possession of it. The occlumency lessons. The fragment's pattern of activation, what triggered it, what the triggers told him about its nature, the distinction between what was clearly the fragment's contribution to his magical performance and what was clearly his own. He talked about the dream and the word hungry he'd written in the box and his theory about what it meant for two fragments made simultaneously to have been shaped by such different experiences for 50 years. Hermione listened with her quill moving constantly, taking notes. Ron listened with a chocolate frog card in one hand, Dumbledore's card, as it happened, which he'd drawn 3 times in a row this term and which he kept because the irony appealed to him. So Lucius Malfoy has the diary, Hermione said when Harry finished. Apparently. And Snape knows this. Yes. And Dumbledore, she looked at Harry. Does Dumbledore know Malfoy has it? I think Dumbledore knows about the diary, Harry said slowly. I'm less sure he knows it's currently with Malfoy. Dumbledore's research on the Horcruxes seems to be mostly theoretical. He knows they exist, he knows roughly how many, but tracking their actual physical locations. He paused. I think that part's still in progress. So we know something Dumbledore doesn't, Ron said, with a certain satisfaction. Possibly, Harry said. And we know it because the fragment told me. He looked at his journal, at the box he'd drawn around the word hungry. Which brings me to the next thing. He told them about the dialogue idea. Writing in the diary. Hermione put her quill down. Harry, she said. I know, he said. Writing in a Horcrux, I know. Would be essentially inviting a piece of Voldemort's, I know, Harry said, and he said it with enough gentleness that she stopped. I know all the objections. They're valid. But here's what else is true, the fragment in me has been trying to show me the diary for 3 weeks. Not randomly, with a purpose. It keeps returning to it. It's not Voldemort doing that. Voldemort doesn't have a body and his main soul is barely functional. This is the fragment itself. This is the piece of riddle that's been living in me for 10 years, that has been steeped in my values and my experiences and, he paused. I think it's lonely. Ron very carefully did not laugh. He pressed his lips together very hard. Not lonely like a person, Harry said, acknowledging this. Lonely like a part of something that recognizes another part of the same thing and wants contact. The fragment in the diary is the same age, from the same source. They were made together. And the one in me has spent 10 years being a person, being shaped by a person, and the one in the diary has spent 50 years being an object. He looked at Hermione. What does 50 years of being alone in a diary do to a fragment of soul? She was quiet for a moment. It makes it desperate, she said quietly. Volatile. Anything that activates it, any writing in its pages, it would respond to extremely strongly. Latch on. Yes, Harry said. Which is what makes it dangerous. Which is also what makes it an opportunity. He leaned forward. If I can reach it, if the connection between our fragments is strong enough, I might be able to talk to it. Not to Voldemort. To the piece of riddle that's been alone for 50 years. The way I've been talking to the piece of riddle that's been inside me. You've been talking to it? Ron said. Telling it things, Harry said. In bed. Clarifying the situation. That this is my body, my choices. That it's a squatter. He paused. I think it's been listening. Hermione stared at him. And you think the diary fragment will also listen? I think if I approach it through the fragment in me, if I use the connection between them as a channel, then yes. The diary fragment will hear me instead of Riddle. He paused. But we need the diary first. Which means either Malfoy brings it to Hogwarts at some point, Draco, Ron said suddenly. They looked at him. Draco Malfoy, Ron said. His dad has it. But Draco's here. And Draco's been, he paused, organizing his thoughts. You know how he keeps trying to talk to Harry? Like, at every opportunity. In the corridors, before class, that time he hung around after potions even though Snape was still in the room. Harry had noticed this. He'd been watching it, in fact. Draco Malfoy's attempts to establish some kind of relationship with him had been consistent and persistent and calibrated in a way that suggested Draco was acting not just on his own impulse but on instruction. His father had told him to befriend Harry Potter. His father had told him this was important. Lucius Malfoy knew what Harry was. He'd been told by Voldemort, or he'd worked it out, or Dumbledore's experiment had leaked more than Dumbledore thought. But Lucius Malfoy knew, and he'd sent his son to Hogwarts with the instruction, get close to Potter. Draco's father sent him to make friends with me, Harry said. Is that bad? Ron said. Harry thought about it. No, he said. It's useful. He looked at the Dumbledore chocolate frog card in Ron's hand. I'm going to make friends with Draco Malfoy. Ron looked pained. Do you have to? Just enough, Harry said. Just enough to find out what his father told him. And whether the diary is coming to Hogwarts. What makes you think it would come to Hogwarts? Hermione said. Because, Harry said, if Voldemort is trying to return, and he is, he's been trying since the night he lost his body, then the Chamber of Secrets is the most useful place for his first Horcrux. It's where Riddle was most powerful. It's where the fragment was made. He looked at them both. The diary isn't going to stay in Malfoy Manor much longer. Something is setting this in motion. I can feel it. The fragment knows it too. He touched his scar unconsciously. Something is moving. A clemency Monday evening was not what Harry expected. He'd expected instruction. A methodical approach, Snape explaining the theory, Harry listening, attempting exercises. Instead Snape opened the door to his office, said, sit, pointed at a chair across from his own, sat down, and said, I am going to attempt to enter your mind. Resist. Without telling me how. Harry said. Correct. What you resist with instinctively will tell me more than what you attempt after instruction. He raised his wand. Ready? Yes, Harry said, and meant it. Snape cast Legilimens. What happened next lasted approximately 4 seconds and covered, for Harry, the subjective experience of something vast and pointed attempting to part the surface of his mind the way a hand parts water, purposeful, looking for specific things, moving with the practiced ease of someone who had done this many times. Harry felt it enter. He felt it touch the first layer of accessible memory, the sorting, the great hall, the moment the hat spoke, and start to move deeper. And the fragment woke up. Not slowly. Not gradually. It came up like something surfacing from depth, fast and massive and very awake, and what it did was not build a wall. It built something more like a mirror. Harry felt the legilimency probe hit it and refract, bend back, redirect, turn the looking back on the looker, and Snape made a sharp sound and broke the connection so fast his chair scraped backward 2 inches on the stone floor. They looked at each other. Snape was breathing slightly faster than normal. His wand hand had lowered. "That wasn't you," he said. "No," Harry agreed. "The fragment." "Yes. It protected you," Snape said, and the word came out with a specific register of complex professional emotion. "A soul fragment that has oriented itself toward the host's protection." He looked at Harry with those dark eyes that were doing something Harry was now able to read as recalibrating a model I've been using for decades. That is not a thing I have encountered in the literature. "I told it this was my life," Harry said. "My body. My choices. I told it 3 weeks ago that it could be useful or quiet." He paused. Apparently it chose useful. Snape was quiet for a long moment. Then, again. "This time I will push harder. And this time I want you to attempt to do what the fragment did, mirror it, consciously, not letting the fragment carry the weight alone." "How?" "The fragment knows how," Snape said. "It just showed you. You felt the mechanism. Replicate it." Harry thought about what he'd felt, the turning, the refraction, the sense of using the incoming force to redirect rather than block. Judo, he thought, though he'd never been taught judo, and then realized that was interesting, because where had he gotten the concept of judo? He looked inward at the hum. The presence was alert, engaged, and had a feeling Harry could only describe as, "Yes, exactly." "Ready," he said. "Legilimens." This time Harry felt the probe enter and he reached for the mechanism he'd felt the fragment use, the turning of attention, the mirroring, the specific way of making someone else's force into their own problem, and it worked, not as perfectly as the fragment's reflex had worked, more like a hand trying to replicate a motion it had seen once, but it worked enough. The probe bent. Not all the way back, but sideways, diffusing into the middle distance of memory rather than driving deeper. Snape broke the connection again. "Better," he said, which in Snape's mouth contained the full complexity of an extended compliment. They worked for an hour. By the end Harry could manage the basic mirror refract consistently, though Snape could still breach it with a sharp enough cast. The fragment's version remained faster and more complete, it moved with the speed of instinct rather than learned technique, but Harry's version was getting there. "The fragment's protective response," Snape said, at the end, as he was capping a vial of something he'd been making notes with. "You said you spoke to it. Directly." "Yes," Harry said. "What do you say?" "Mostly I tell it facts," Harry said. "What's happening?" "What I'm planning. What I've found out." He paused. "I think it responds to honesty. It spent 10 years being completely unacknowledged. Nobody knew it was there. Being seen, being addressed directly, it responds to that." Snape looked at him. "You are treating a piece of the darkest wizard in living memory like a neglected houseplant. Is that wrong?" Harry said. Snape thought about this with apparent genuine seriousness. "Strategically," he said, "no. It is possibly the cleverest approach I could have imagined." A pause. "I would not have thought of it." "You would have tried to suppress it," Harry said. Yes, Snape said, without defensiveness. Yes, that is what I would have done. And it would have been wrong. He looked at the middle distance for a moment. Your mother, he said, without preparation, was very good at seeing things that other people missed because they were looking directly at them. Harry held very still. She would have approved of your approach, Snape said, and closed his notebook, and that was apparently all he intended to say about that. Harry stood up to leave. At the door he paused. Professor. The diary. You said Malfoy had it. Do you know why? Snape was quiet for a moment. Lucius Malfoy is a servant of Voldemort who has not, technically, committed a crime since the Dark Lord's fall. He has kept certain of the Dark Lord's objects safe. A pause. The diary is one. He has been waiting for a sign that the time is right to use it. Use it how? Harry said. Introduce it into Hogwarts, Snape said. Through the chamber. To test whether the soul fragment is still active. Whether Riddle can still function through it. He looked at Harry. I believe that plan is already in motion. How long? Harry said. Before the diary arrives here. Snape paused. I would estimate, this year. Before the end of term. Harry nodded. He thanked Snape and left, and as he walked back through the dungeon corridor toward the staircase, he felt the hum in his chest shift, alert, purposeful, oriented toward something ahead in the story rather than behind it. I know, he told it. I know it's coming. The fragment did its not quite a sound thing. The acknowledgement. And then, for the first time, something slightly different, a sensation Harry couldn't fully name. Not a word. Not an image. More like a temperature. Warm. The fragment, for the first time, felt warm. He held that in his mind all the way up the stairs. Thursday of the 4th week. Astronomy Tower. Half an hour before curfew. Harry sat at the base of the telescope mount with his journal open and the night spread out above him, clear, cold, September stars sharp as needles, and he wrote by wandlight. He wrote what he knew about the diary and Malfoy and Snape's timeline. He wrote about occlumency and the fragment's protective reflex. He wrote about the warmth he'd felt in the corridor and what it meant, what it might mean, for his theory about voluntary extraction. If it can choose warmth, if it has something like preference, then it has the essential architecture for a genuine choice. And if it can choose, if it can genuinely choose to release its attachment to me, then Dumbledore's 50 years of certainty about extraction being impossible was built on an incomplete model. He closed the journal. He looked at the stars. All right, he said aloud, quietly, to the thing behind his scar. We're going to be tested soon. The diary is coming. When it gets here, I'm going to need you with me. Not running things. Not taking over. With me. He paused. Do you understand the difference? The night was very quiet. The hum settled into something that felt, very precisely, like, yes. Harry exhaled. He looked at the Milky Way stretched above him, cold and enormous and indifferent in the way of everything vast, and thought about a fragment of Voldemort's soul choosing, over 10 years of living in a cupboard under the stairs, to become something other than what it had been made to be. He thought, remarkable what loneliness teaches you, if you survive it. He didn't know if he was thinking that about himself or the fragment. He suspected both. He gathered his things and went inside, down through the warm stone belly of the castle, and did not dream of the diary that night for the first time in 2 weeks. He dreamed of his mother instead. He'd never dreamed of her before. He didn't know her face, and even in the dream her face was turned away, but she was there, warm and present and thoroughly, unmistakably real, and in the dream she was looking at something Harry couldn't see, something just past the edge of the dream's frame, and she was not afraid. He woke before dawn and thought, the fragment showed me that. He lay in the dark and felt, against the back of his sternum, the warm specific pulse of something that was not quite his and not quite other, something in between, in the place where the math of his soul got too complicated for simple arithmetic, and he thought, thank you. It pulsed once. Like a heartbeat. He slept. Chapter 4, The Alliance. The letter from the ministry arrived on a Wednesday morning in the 5th week of term, carried by an official owl so formally postured it looked like it was trying to make a point, and it landed in front of Dumbledore with a thud that was slightly theatrical for a piece of parchment. Harry, 3 seats down at the Gryffindor table, watched Dumbledore open it. He watched because he'd developed the habit of watching Dumbledore the way you watch weather, not because you could stop it, but because reading the signs early gave you time to prepare. And what he saw now was interesting. Dumbledore read the letter, refolded it once, set it beside his porridge, and resumed eating without changing his expression by a single degree. Which meant the letter was significant, because only significant things got that level of deliberate non-reaction. Harry filed it. Ate his toast. Listened to the table around him and thought about other things. Across the hall at the Slytherin table, Draco Malfoy was eating with the precision of someone performing nonchalance. He'd been doing that for 3 days, performing nonchalance near Harry, in corridors, in shared classes, in the brief chaos of entering and exiting the Great Hall. Waiting. His father had told him to make an approach and he hadn't found the right moment yet because Harry kept being surrounded by Ron and Hermione in a way that Draco found socially impenetrable and mildly insulting. Harry decided to solve this for him. After breakfast, as the hall began emptying, he peeled away from Ron and Hermione at the door, library, I'll meet you, and walked the long way round to Charms, which took him past the Slytherin corridor, and sure enough Draco was there, alone, just ahead, having apparently taken the same long way round for similar reasons. Malfoy, Harry said. Draco turned around with the expression of someone who has been waiting for something and is now that specific kind of calm that is adjacent to relief. Potter. Walk with me, Harry said. They fell into step. It wasn't comfortable exactly but it was functional, and there was something honest about that. They were here for reasons, both of them, and both of them knew it. Your father told you to talk to me, Harry said. Draco's step barely hitched. Barely. He told me it would be advantageous to know you. He knows what I am, Harry said. The Horcrux. A pause. Draco's jaw worked slightly. Yes. How long has he known? Since before I came to Hogwarts, Draco said. He told me last summer. He said, he stopped. Recalibrated. Draco Malfoy was, Harry had observed, considerably more intelligent than the performance of arrogant ease suggested, and right now that intelligence was running calculations about how honest to be and landing somewhere in the vicinity of, quite. He said the Dark Lord told him. Before the Dark Lord, before he lost his body. He said there was a living Horcrux and it was inside the Potter boy and that when the time came, it would be important. Important how, Harry said. He didn't say exactly. A shorter pause this time. But the way he talked about it, I think he thinks the Dark Lord will use you. To come back. Through me, Harry said. Or through whatever connection exists between you. Harry thought about this. The fragment had been showing him the diary. The fragment in him recognized the fragment in the diary. If both fragments could be activated simultaneously, if Voldemort's main soul, however diminished, could work through both connections at once, does your father have anything that belonged to Riddle? Harry said. Draco went very still. It was a fractional stillness, a half-second freeze before the controlled resumption of movement, but Harry caught it cleanly. I don't know what you're talking about, Draco said. Yes you do, Harry said, without accusation. I'm not asking to take it. I'm not going to tell anyone you confirmed it. I need to know because it's relevant to stopping the thing your father is helping to start. He paused. I don't think you want it started either. A long beat. Their footsteps on the stone floor. Somewhere above them, Peeves was singing something cheerfully obscene. There's a diary, Draco said, very quietly. I saw it in his study once. He keeps it separate from everything else. Locked in a box that has 17 different security charms on it, which I counted because, he stopped. Because I wondered what was in it. When was the last time you saw it? Last summer, Draco said. Before I came back to Hogwarts. He looked at Harry sidelong, a complicated sideways look full of things he'd been trained not to say. He brought it out when he was doing something. I don't know what. But the box was open and the diary was on the desk. Has he mentioned it this term? Harry said. In any of his letters. Draco was quiet. He said something about school supplies, he said. In the third week. Said he might be sending some things through. Extra things. He looked at Harry directly for the first time. You think the diary is coming here? Yes, Harry said. Why here? Because this is where Riddle was powerful, Harry said. Because the Chamber of Secrets is under this school and whatever Riddle put into that diary, it has a strong pull toward the chamber. The diary isn't just a container for a soul fragment. It's a key. Draco absorbed this. His face was doing something that Harry suspected it rarely did in public, actually thinking, without the performance of certainty over the top of it. My father is going to use it, he said. He's going to introduce it into the school. Yes, Harry said. If I told him not to, Draco started, and then stopped, because they both knew how that sentence ended. I'm not asking you to stop him, Harry said. I'm asking you to tell me if you hear anything more specific. Timing. Method. Anything. He looked at Draco. In exchange for which I'll tell you something honest. What? What I'm planning, Harry said. The plan isn't to let it happen and fight it afterward. The plan is to intercept the diary before it reaches the chamber. And when I do, I'm going to do something to it that nobody has thought to try yet. He paused. Which should render your father's plan completely pointless without anyone having to be arrested or killed. Draco looked at him for a long moment. You're very strange, Potter, he said. I've been told, Harry said. Why would you tell me your plan? I could tell my father. You could, Harry agreed. But you're not going to. How do you know? Harry considered how to explain it. He'd been reading Draco for 5 weeks, not with the Fragment's help, just his own 11 years of watching people manage their real feelings under the weight of expectation and performance. Because you counted the security charms on that box, he said. Because you wanted to know what was inside it badly enough to count 17 separate charms and remember the number. Because you're curious about what your father is doing and you don't entirely trust what you're being told about it. He met Draco's eyes. And because you're smart enough to know that a plan that ends without arrests or deaths is better for your family than the alternative. Draco said nothing for a moment. All right, he said. I'll let you know if I hear anything. Thank you, Harry said. They'd arrived outside the charms classroom. Other students were filing in. Draco peeled off without a backward look, rejoining a cluster of Slytherins with the ease of someone sliding back into a role they know exactly how to play. Harry went inside and sat next to Ron, who looked at him and then looked at the corridor where Draco had been visible for 2 seconds before vanishing and said, Did you just? Yes, Harry said. Voluntarily. It was useful. He's awful, Ron said. He's complicated, Harry said. Which is different. Ron looked deeply unconvinced but let it go. McGonagall called Harry to her office that afternoon. It was a different kind of call from Dumbledore's. Where Dumbledore's notes had the quality of invitations with invisible walls, McGonagall's was a direct instruction, Potter, my office, 4 o'clock. Professor McGonagall. No warmth, no lemon drops. Just a directive delivered with the efficiency of someone who has decided to do something and is doing it. Her office was Spartan in comparison to Dumbledore's, clean lines, a fireplace, a desk arranged with military order, and exactly 3 personal items visible, a small framed photograph of what appeared to be the Gryffindor Quidditch team from some decades past, a tartan tin that probably contained biscuits, and a copy of Hogwarts, a history on the corner of the desk that was so worn it had been rebound twice. She was standing at the window when he came in. She turned, gestured to a chair, and sat across from him without preamble. "I want to know what Dumbledore has told you," she said. "And what you have found out that Dumbledore hasn't told you." Harry looked at her. "Why?" "Because I am the deputy headmistress of this school," she said, "and it has been brought to my attention, by several sources, not just the Sorting Hat's rather spectacular announcement, that decisions have been made regarding your welfare that I was not consulted on." Her voice was exact and sharp and contained something beneath the professional authority that was genuinely furious in the way only long-delayed discovery of a betrayal makes people furious. "I am responsible for the students of this school. I take that responsibility with complete seriousness. And I have discovered, over the past 5 weeks, that one of those students has been placed in circumstances that were," she stopped. Selected her next words with precision. "Arranged. Without my knowledge or consent." "You found out about the Dursleys," Harry said. A pause. "I visited the family. Briefly. Before your first year. I spent a day observing. I had reservations." She looked at him directly. "Strong reservations." "You told Dumbledore," Harry said. "I told Dumbledore. He told me the blood protection was essential and the situation was managed." Her mouth thinned. "I accepted that. I should not have accepted that. I have recently obtained some additional information about the reasoning behind placing you with that family, and what I have learned has confirmed that my reservations at the time were not merely emotional." Harry watched her face. She was a woman who did not make this kind of statement casually. The anger underneath was old and had been sitting, he suspected, since at least the night after the sorting, gathering mass. "What did you find out?" he said. "I found out," she said carefully, "that you were placed there in part to ensure that you would not form close attachments. To keep you." She stopped again. The word she was looking for was clearly one she found difficult to say because it expressed the full moral weight of what had been done. "Pliable," she said finally. "For a plan that requires your death." The room was very quiet. "You've seen the research," Harry said. "Not directly. I have a source." She looked at him. "The nature of the source I am not at liberty to share. But the information is reliable." She paused. "Harry. I want you to understand that what I am saying to you now, what I am about to offer, is not sanctioned by the headmaster and is not part of any existing institutional plan. This is me, as your head of house and as deputy headmistress, telling you that I believe the plan in question is unconscionable. And that I intend to obstruct it." Harry held her gaze. She met it without flinching. "What are you offering?" he said. "Resources," she said. "Institutional access that Dumbledore controls and that I can, in specific circumstances, work around. Certain wards and records pertaining to this school that are relevant to soul magic and the Chamber of Secrets specifically." She paused. "And my testimony. If it comes to a point where this situation requires public exposure, where the facts of Dumbledore's decisions need to be placed before the Wisengamot or the public, I will testify." That was significant. Harry understood what it cost her to say it. "I've been building towards something," Harry said. "A plan that doesn't require my death and doesn't require waiting for Dumbledore to authorize each step." He looked at her steadily. "If I tell you what I'm planning, all of it, will you try to stop me or control it?" "No," she said. "I will advise you, clearly, when I think you are making an error. I will not stop you." She paused. "I am sufficiently confident in your judgment to offer you that." "I'm 11, Harry said. "You are," she agreed, and said it the way he'd said it to Dumbledore, acknowledging the fact without accepting the limitations it was meant to impose. "And you are the most situationally intelligent student I have encountered in 40 years of teaching. Which is either a testament to your own character or a very unsettling indicator of what living inside the situation has taught you." She looked at him steadily. Possibly both. Harry told her everything. All of it, the library research, the pensive memory, the diary, Snape's confirmation about Malfoy, the occlumency lessons, the Fragment's behavior, the warmth he'd felt, his theory about voluntary extraction. He told her the timeline he and Hermione had built. He told her about Draco. She listened. She did not interrupt. She made 2 notes on a piece of parchment and did not show him what they said. When he finished, she said, "The Soul Theory book from 1958. The reference to voluntary extraction." "Yes," Harry said. "There is a manuscript," she said, "in the Hogwarts archive. Not the school library, the archive. Deep storage, pre-1900 material. It is not catalogued in any index one have found. But I know it exists because Dumbledore asked me to file it personally in 1974 without reading it, which is the surest way I know to make me want to read it." She met his eyes. "I believe it may be the primary source text that all subsequent Horcrux soul theory has been derived from. Including the 1958 book." "What does it say?" Harry said. "I don't know," she said. "I was given a sealed copy and told to file it." A pause. "I filed a sealed copy." Harry took a moment to appreciate this. "You kept one." "I kept one," McGonagall confirmed, with absolute composure, as if this were a perfectly ordinary sentence. "In a place Dumbledore would not look. I did not read it because at the time I had no reason to. I have reason now." "When can I see it?" Harry said. "Tomorrow evening," she said. "After dinner. Come here." She stood, which was the signal that the meeting was ending. "One more thing." She looked at him with the full weight of what she was carrying, 40 years in this school, genuine love for its students, a genuine fury at a plan that had used both of those things against itself. "I want you to understand that I am not doing this because I believe Dumbledore is a bad man. He is not a bad man. He is," she paused. "He is a man so accustomed to being correct about important things that the distinction between I have concluded this is right and this is right has become difficult for him to see." She looked at Harry. "He is the cleverest person I have ever known. He may also be wrong about this. Completely." "Yes," Harry said. "He may be." He said good night and left, and walked back to Gryffindor Tower thinking about what she'd said, the distinction between I have concluded this is right and this is right, and thinking about how long it takes to become so certain of your own judgment that you stop being able to question it. 50 years, maybe. Maybe less. Maybe you just needed to be right about enough things in a row. Ron and Hermione were waiting for him in the common room. This was not a planned meeting, but it had the quality of one. They'd arranged themselves in the chairs nearest the fire with the particular posture of people who have been talking and are ready to continue the conversation. Harry sat. Told them about McGonagall. Hermione's expression went through several phases rapidly: surprise, calculation, relief, and then something that settled into a focused intensity. "She has the manuscript," she said. "She has a copy," Harry said. "The primary source text," Hermione breathed. "Harry, if that text has the original theory on voluntary extraction, before Dumbledore got to it, before 50 years of his conclusions shaped how everyone read it, then we see the idea before it was buried under his certainty that it couldn't work," Harry said. "Yes." Ron was leaning forward with his elbows on his knees, wearing the expression of someone thinking harder than his usual expression suggested he bothered. "McGonagall, Snape, now Draco," he said. "Plus us. That's actually starting to look like something." "It's starting to look like a coalition," Hermione said. "I hate that word," Ron said. "Sounds political." "It is political," Harry said. "Everything about this is political. Dumbledore runs this school and he has 50 years of moral authority and genuine achievement behind him. Going against any part of his plan is going against the most respected wizard alive." He paused. "But he's wrong about one specific thing." And that one thing happens to be whether I live or die. So, Ron agreed firmly. Snape, Hermione said. Is he with us? Actually with us? I don't know yet, Harry said honestly. He's operating on his own terms. He's sharing information because he thinks it serves his goals, and his goals align with mine more than they align with Dumbledore's at this specific point. He paused. He's not going to join anything. But he's parallel. Moving in the same direction. That's enough, Ron said. For now. Harry nodded. He looked at the fire. The common room around them was filling up with the after-dinner crowd, older Gryffindors sprawled with exploding snap and half-finished essays, a group of second-years arguing about something Quidditch-related, Percy reading in the corner with the focused intensity of someone who uses reading as a territorial claim. Normal. The normalcy of Hogwarts going about its evening, apparently indifferent to the fact that 3 of its first years were quietly assembling a resistance to the headmaster's 50-year plan. I need to tell you both something, Harry said. They looked at him. The fragment, he said. In me. I've been treating it like a separate entity. Something I'm negotiating with. He paused. I think that's been right, as an approach. But last week it did something. He told them about the occlumency session. The mirror reflex. The way the fragment had protected him without being asked. And then in the corridor after, it felt warm. For the first time. Hermione was very quiet. That's not what a soul fragment is supposed to do, she said, slowly. In the theory. A Horcrux fragment is supposed to maintain its essential character, whatever of Riddle's soul was captured in the moment of creation. Ruthless. Self-preserving. Cold. She looked at Harry. What you're describing is a soul fragment that has changed. Been changed, Harry said. By living in me. For 10 years. He paused. Which means Dumbledore's entire extraction model, built on the assumption that the fragment is still essentially Riddle, is wrong. Not just theoretically wrong. Fundamentally wrong. He looked at them. The thing inside me isn't Riddle anymore. Not entirely. It's been shaped by 10 years of my particular experience. My values. My choices. The cupboard. Hagrid showing up on my birthday. He paused. Apparently whatever it was before, it's been living a different kind of life. Ron's face was doing something complicated. So part of Voldemort's soul, he said carefully, has been raised like you were raised. In that house. Through all of that. Yes, Harry said. And it turned out, Ron gestured vaguely. Like you. More or less, Harry said. It's not me. It's still its own thing. But it's not what it was. He paused. Which is what makes voluntary extraction possible. The fragment has enough of its own developed character now, enough independent selfhood, that the choice to release would be genuinely meaningful. It's not just a fragment. It's become something closer to a person, Hermione said quietly. A small one, Harry said. In the way of something very young, in a very old thing's shape. They sat with this for a moment. Ron said, we need to give it a name. No we don't, Harry said. It'll be easier to talk about, Ron said. Absolutely not, Harry said. Tom. Ron offered. Since it's Riddles, we are not calling it Tom, Harry said with complete firmness. Honestly I agree, Hermione said. But Ron has a point that referring to the fragment every time is unwieldy. Fragment is fine, Harry said. We're fine. Hermione pressed her lips together in the way of someone archiving an argument for later. The manuscript was in a leather case that McGonagall produced from the inside of a fireplace that turned out to have a small sealed cavity behind its back panel, which was either architectural serendipity or a deliberate design choice by whoever had built the deputy headmistress's office. The case was old, genuinely old, the leather cracked and dark and smelling of time and something like cedar, and it contained a single bound document, handwritten in a script so small and dense that Hermione immediately produced her reading glasses. They read it together, the four of them, Harry, Ron, Hermione, and McGonagall, who sat at her desk with her tartan tin open and a biscuit she appeared to have forgotten about in her hand, and what it said rewrote everything. The manuscript was dated 1847. The author was unnamed, but they were, from the internal evidence, a Hogwarts teacher, someone who had spent decades working with young people and their magical development and who had, through a series of observations that the author themselves described as accidental, developed a theory about the nature of soul magic that went significantly further than anything Harry had found in the library. The author's central argument was this: a soul, unlike the physical body, does not have fixed form. It is responsive. It is, in the author's phrase, permeable to its circumstances. A soul anchored in an object becomes, over time, a record of the object, its stillness, its silence, its lack of experience. A soul anchored in a living being becomes, over time, a record of that living being's life. Not a copy. Not a replacement for the original character. But a palimpsest, a thing written over, the original still visible beneath, but the new writing real and present in its own thing. The implications for a Horcrux, the author stated, were as follows: a soul fragment placed within a living vessel is subject to the same law of permeability as any other soul. Given sufficient time, the author estimates several years at minimum, a decade or more for complete integration, the fragment will develop independent characteristics drawn from the vessel's lived experience. These characteristics are not superficial. They alter the fundamental architecture of the fragment in ways that cannot be reversed. A fragment so altered is no longer purely the extension of its creator. It has become, in a meaningful magical sense, its own entity. The practical consequence of this is significant: a sufficiently altered fragment, existing within a living vessel, is capable of genuine volition. It can, theoretically, choose. And if both vessel and fragment are capable of genuine simultaneous choice, the vessel choosing to release, the fragment choosing to be released, the extraction can occur without destruction of either. The mechanism is not a spell. It is not a potion or a ritual in any conventional sense. It is an act of will, performed with complete clarity of intention by both parties, under conditions of absolute emotional honesty. The fragment must not be forced. The vessel must not be coerced. Both must choose freely, with full understanding of what the choice means. I have never witnessed this performed. I am not aware that it has ever been performed. But I am sufficiently confident in the theoretical framework to state, it is possible. The room was very quiet. 1847, Hermione said. Dumbledore filed this in his own archive in 1974, McGonagall said. And never shared it. He read this, Harry said, and decided it was impossible anyway. Because he couldn't manufacture the conditions. He couldn't manufacture the conditions in 1974, McGonagall said. In 1974, you were not yet born. The Horcrux did not yet exist within a living vessel. The fragment had not yet had 10 years to become what it has become. Her voice was controlled, but the fury underneath it was present and enormous. He filed this manuscript and built his entire strategy around the assumption that these conditions, the conditions this author describes, would never come to exist. But they did, Hermione said. They exist right now. They exist right now, McGonagall confirmed. Harry was looking at the manuscript. At the phrase absolute emotional honesty. He was thinking about the fragment in the occlumency session, throwing up a mirror shield without being asked. He was thinking about warmth in a corridor. He was thinking about 3 weeks of bedtime conversations in a dark dormitory, telling a piece of Voldemort's soul the truth about its situation with the same straightforwardness he'd used to talk to himself through 11 years of the Dersleys. You've already been doing it, he thought. Not as a technique. Not on purpose. As a habit. Because honesty was the only thing that ever worked, in that house, and so you brought it here. We can do it, he said. Now. Not soon, there are pieces still missing. The diary needs to be here, because I need to understand what the fragment in the diary is, and what it means for the fragment in me. And the other Horcruxes, Dumbledore said he thinks there are 6, plus me. He paused. The extraction doesn't destroy the others. That's a separate problem. One problem at a time, Ron said. Yes, Harry said. But the problems are connected. He looked at McGonagall. The diary is coming to Hogwarts. Probably before the end of term. Lucius Malfoy is planning to introduce it through Draco. I don't know the exact mechanism yet. When it arrives, I need to intercept it. And I need to deal with it before it reaches the chamber. He paused. And I need a way to do that without Dumbledore knowing in advance, because if Dumbledore knows, he'll intervene, McGonagall said. He'll stop it, Harry said. He'll see the diary as an opportunity to further his own research rather than let me address it in the way I'm planning to address it. McGonagall looked at him steadily. What are you planning to do with the diary? Talk to it, Harry said. Talk to it, she repeated. Talk to the fragment inside it, he said. Using the connection between my fragment and the diary's fragment. Use the manuscript's framework, emotional honesty, clear intention. Try to reach it. It's been in that diary for 50 years, McGonagall said. Whatever it has become, whatever 50 years of isolation in an object has made it, it will not be the same as what you've described in your own fragment. No, Harry agreed. It'll be worse. More desperate, more volatile, more riddle and less, adapted. He paused. But the fragment in me knows it. They're connected. If I use that connection as a bridge, if my fragment can vouch for me, in whatever way fragments vouch, you think you can reach it, she said. I think I have to try, Harry said. Because if the diary reaches the chamber and Riddle activates it the way Snape thinks he's planning to, the chamber opens, the basilisk wakes up, someone dies. Possibly several people. He looked at her. I'm not going to let that happen while I have a way to prevent it. McGonagall looked at him for a long moment. Hermione was very still, clearly running calculations. Ron had finished his biscuit and was looking at Harry with the expression he developed. Harry was learning to read it. That meant I think this is completely mad and I'm entirely behind you. Right, McGonagall said at last. She opened her desk drawer and produced a piece of parchment. Here is what I can do. The school has a ward system for tracking the introduction of dark objects through the wards. Normally this alerts the headmaster. I can, with some effort, adjust the routing so the alert comes to me first. She looked at Harry. First. Not instead. Dumbledore will still know, but I'll have a window. How long a window? Harry said. Minutes, she said. Perhaps 20. That's enough, Harry said. Is it? Ron said doubtfully. Has to be, Harry said. That night, after a dinner at which Dumbledore had been particularly warm and attentive to Harry in a way that suggested the ministry letter that morning had contained something that made Harry's continued goodwill more immediately important, Harry sat in his dormitory and opened his journal and wrote for an hour. He wrote the full plan as he understood it now. The moving pieces, the timing uncertainties, the gaps. The diary. The chamber. The extraction framework and what it required. He wrote about Draco and the information he was hoping to extract from that uneasy alliance. He wrote about Snape's parallel movement and McGonagall's direct one and how they were forming, between them, something that Dumbledore had not planned for, a structure of knowledgeable adults and one very unusual first year that existed entirely outside his 50-year design. He stopped writing and looked at the scar in his small mirror. The hum was steady. Present. Almost comfortable, which was the strangest thing of all, that something which had once been the most dangerous fragment of the darkest soul alive had become, within him, something he could describe as almost comfortable. We're getting there, he told it. It's going to be messy. The diary part especially. He paused. I need you to be ready. When the diary gets here, you're going to feel it. It's going to be strong, whatever it's become. 50 years of being alone and hungry and full of riddle. He paused. I need you to hold on to yourself. To what you've become. Don't let it pull you back toward what you were. The hum shifted. Something that was not quite fear, the fragment didn't do fear in any clean way, but an acknowledgement of difficulty. Of cost. I know, Harry said. I know it'll be hard. He paused. But you're not what you were. And neither am I. He put the mirror down. We're going to do this together. All of it. The warmth, steady and real. He fell asleep with the lamp still on and his journal open on the page that said, at the top, in his own handwriting, what the fragment has become under the right conditions. And below it, in smaller letters, underlined, what we both have. 2 days later, a Hogwarts owl landed on the breakfast table in front of Draco Malfoy and Draco, without looking up from his eggs, slid a small folded note down the length of his hand and palmed it with the casual ease of someone who had been watching his father do exactly this his entire life. 2 hours later, in the corridor outside herbology, Draco handed Harry the note as they passed each other in opposite directions, wordlessly, without breaking stride. Harry unfolded it in the privacy of a bathroom stall. It said, in Draco's handwriting, terse and deliberate, end of November. He's sending it with me. I don't know the exact mechanism but it will be in my luggage at the Christmas break. Except I'm not coming home for Christmas this year. Harry read this twice. End of November. 6 weeks away. He folded the note. He thought about the fragment, about 50 years in a dark box, about what that did to a piece of soul. About what he was going to have to say to it when they met, and what it was going to take to reach it before Riddle could. He went to find Hermione and Ron. He had 6 weeks. He used all of them. Chapter 5, The Extraction Problem. November arrived like a door closing. The castle shifted into its winter self, corridors drafty in specific places that every returning student knew and every first-year discovered personally, the lake going the color of hammered pewter, the grounds crunching underfoot in the early mornings when Harry ran the perimeter path before breakfast. He'd started doing that in October, partly because the fragment seemed calmer after physical movement, partly because it gave him 40 minutes of uninterrupted thinking time in the cold air where no one could overhear him talking quietly to himself, which he did more than was probably advisable. The 6 weeks had been productive. He and Hermione had read the 1847 manuscript 6 times between them and compiled what Hermione called a working framework, not a spell, not a ritual, because the manuscript was explicit that it wasn't either of those things, but a sequence of conditions that needed to exist simultaneously for extraction to be attempted. The author had been precise about this in a way that was both useful and demanding. Both parties must understand what they are choosing. Both must be capable of articulating the choice internally, not aloud necessarily, but with complete clarity of intention. The vessel must release from a place of genuine willingness, not desperation or coercion. The fragment must release from a place of, the author had paused here, scratched out a word, written another, genuine readiness. Not desire necessarily. Readiness. The distinction is important. A fragment cannot be pressured into readiness. It can only arrive there. How do you make a soul fragment ready? Ron had said, when Hermione read that passage aloud. You don't make it, Harry had said. You wait for it to get there. And if it doesn't get there in time? Harry had looked at him steadily. Then we try something else. But he thought the fragment was getting there. The warmth had become more consistent, less like a rare weather event and more like the baseline temperature of a room that had slowly been heated over months. In the occlumency sessions with Snape, the fragment's mirror reflex had refined itself into something almost elegant, working not just against deliberate legilimency attacks but against the background ambient pressure of strong emotions in crowded spaces, like the Great Hall at mealtimes or the Quidditch pitch when Gryffindor played Slytherin in October. That game had been interesting. Harry had been put on the team as seeker, first year on the house team was essentially unheard of, and McGonagall had arranged it with such precise professional neutrality that Harry suspected she was deeply pleased with herself, and during the game the fragment had done something new. A bludger came from behind, fast and deliberate, and aimed at his head, and before Harry had registered it consciously the fragment had sent a sharp directional pulse, left, now, and he dropped 6 feet in a half-second, and the bludger had clipped the tail of his broom instead of his skull. He'd caught the snitch 30 seconds later, mostly because the near miss had focused him to a point of crystalline clarity that the fragment seemed to share. After the game Ron had said, you folded sideways before the bludger even got close. I felt it coming, Harry said. Nobody feels a bludger before it. I did, Harry said simply, and Ron had let it go the way Ron let most of the unusual things go, which was by accepting them as normal within the specific gravity of Harry's life. Snape, in the next occlumency session, had said, the fragment is developing what I would describe as a proprioceptive awareness of threat to the host's body. In plain words, Harry said. It's watching out for you, Snape said, with the precise tone of someone who finds this both professionally fascinating and personally inconvenient. Good, Harry said. It is good, Snape said, and the agreement cost him something, visibly, but he paid it. The integration is further along than I expected. More quickly than I expected. He paused. If your theory about voluntary extraction has any validity, the window for it is narrowing. Not because it becomes more difficult, because it becomes more complex. The more integrated the fragment becomes, the more the extraction requires genuine separation of two things that have become genuinely intertwined, Harry said. Yes. Is that a problem? Snape looked at him for a moment. Theoretically, it is not a problem. The 1847 text, he stopped. Harry watched him recalibrate, register that Harry knew about the manuscript. He'd known Snape knew about the manuscript since 2 weeks ago, when a particular sideways reference in their conversation had landed with the specific quality of shared source material. They hadn't addressed it directly until now. The 1847 text, Snape continued, accounts for deep integration. The author's model is based on a premise of integration, not separation. The extraction, as described, is not the violent removal of a foreign element. It is, he seemed to be finding the right word. A parting. A conscious mutual separation between two things that have grown together and choose, freely, to unrow. Like untangling roots, Hermione had said when Harry relayed this, and then looked thoughtful. That's exactly the right metaphor. Two trees growing in the same soil, roots intertwined. You don't cut them apart. You encourage each root to grow toward its own space. And mine has been growing toward him for 10 years, Harry said. And his has been growing toward being in a person, Harry said. Toward being alive. Hermione had been quiet then. The kind of quiet that meant she was holding something she wasn't sure how to say. Hermione, Harry said. After the extraction, she said carefully. The fragment. It doesn't disappear. It doesn't die. It becomes an independent entity. She paused. A soul fragment with 10 years of a person's memories and values, extracted from the person who shaped it, existing, where? How? Harry hadn't fully thought through this. He did now, and the thinking took him somewhere unexpected and a little vertiginous. I don't know, he said. The manuscript doesn't address it, she said. It addresses the extraction. Not the aftermath. Because the author never saw it done, Harry said. It's all theoretical. Yes, she said. Which means we don't know what the fragment is after it leaves you. We don't know if it remains benign. We don't know if it, she paused. Reverts. To Riddle, Harry said. Without the moderating influence of your personality, your values, sustaining it, she said. Yes. They'd looked at each other. One problem at a time, Harry had said, echoing Ron, and Hermione had made the face that meant she accepted this as a provisional strategy while maintaining the right to return to the problem later with force. The third week of November brought two things simultaneously: the first snow of the year, which arrived overnight and transformed the grounds into the kind of landscape that made Hogwarts look like something out of a storybook, and a letter to Draco Malfoy that Harry knew about because Draco came to find him in the library on a Thursday afternoon wearing an expression Harry had not seen on him before. Not performing nonchalance. Not the social armor. Just Draco, minus the armor, looking like he'd been told something he hadn't fully prepared for. "It's been moved up," Draco said, taking the seat across from Harry without being invited. Hermione, next to Harry, looked up from her book and looked at Draco with the evaluating expression she used on new information. Ron, across the table, stopped pretending to read his charms homework. "How far up?" Harry said. "End of this month," Draco said. "He's coming to Hogwarts for a governor's meeting." "Governor's meetings happen twice a year," he paused. "He's added a third one. Called an emergency session. Something to do with the school's response to," he looked at Harry with a careful blankness. "To the Sorting Hat incident. There are several governors who want a formal inquiry into Dumbledore's management of the situation. Your father is one of them," Harry said. "My father called the meeting," Draco said. Harry looked at him steadily. "He's using the diary as cover. The governor's meeting is a reason to come to Hogwarts with luggage and access to the school building." "Yes," Draco said. "He'll introduce the diary into the castle during the meeting." "I think so." "How?" Hermione said. Draco's jaw tightened slightly. "There's a house elf," he said. "My family's. Dobby. My father uses him to move things he doesn't want seen moving." He paused. "Dobby will be with him when he comes." "Where would the diary go?" Harry said. "When Dobby carries it in." "Somewhere close to the chamber," Draco said. "The girls' bathroom on the second floor." He said it quickly, like he'd prepared this sentence in advance and was delivering it before he could reconsider. "There's a sink in there with a serpent tap. That's the entrance to the chamber. My father told me, he told me years ago." When he was explaining, he stopped. Restarted. He was proud of it, he said, with a flatness that said everything about what it felt like to be 14 and realizing your father's pride is in something monstrous. "He told me Riddle opened it using Parseltongue and that the entrance was through the sink." "Harry can speak Parseltongue," Ron said, and Draco blinked. "I can," Harry said. "I found out on Hagrid's birthday. At the zoo." He looked at Draco directly. "I'm not going to let the diary reach the chamber. That's still the plan. But now I need to know exactly when your father is arriving." "Last Friday of the month," Draco said. "The 29th. 6 days." Harry looked at Hermione, who looked back at him with the expression of someone who has 3 days' worth of preparation to do in 6 days and is already mentally organizing it. "All right," Harry said. He looked at Draco. "Thank you." Draco looked down at the table. There was something on his face that was very close to relief, and Harry thought about what it must have been like to carry this, the knowledge of what his father was, what was being set in motion, the instruction to befriend the person at the center of it while knowing what the center of it was. Draco was 12 in 3 weeks. Harry was 12 in July. The space between them was less than a year of chronological age and enormously larger than that in almost every other respect, and Harry had compassion for it, genuine compassion, without it changing anything about what needed to happen. "You should go back to your table," Harry said. "In case anyone's been watching us." Draco stood. "Potter," he said. When this goes wrong, if it goes wrong," Harry said, "I'll tell anyone who asks that you gave me nothing. That you didn't know." Draco looked at him for a moment. Then he left, weaving between the stacks with his usual ease, the armor back in place before he reached the door. Ron watched him go. "He's still awful," he said. "He's scared," Harry said. "Both," Hermione said firmly, and opened her notes. They used the 6 days. Hermione mapped the second-floor bathroom, its location relative to every major corridor intersection, the times it was typically empty, the timing of the prefect rounds, the gaps. She drafted 3 versions of what she called a contingency sequence: what happened if the diary arrived as expected, what happened if it arrived earlier, what happened if Dobby came by a different route. Ron spent 2 days quietly scouting the second floor with the specific goal of identifying anywhere you could wait without being seen and still have a clear sightline to the bathroom entrance. He found 3. He rated them. Harry was discovering, extremely good at tactical spatial thinking in a way that his academic results did not suggest, and which Harry suspected had something to do with growing up in a house where 6 older siblings meant that territory and position were constant negotiations. Harry spent the 6 days in the occlumency sessions and in his own head. He was preparing the fragment. Not manipulating it. Not coaching it. Preparing it, the way you prepare someone for a difficult conversation by making sure they understand what's coming and have had enough honest exchanges beforehand that the difficult one doesn't arrive in a vacuum. He told it about the diary. He told it what the diary might be like, 50 years in a box, the hunger Hermione had described. He told it about the connection they shared, the simultaneous creation, the parallel histories. He told it that when the diary arrived, he was going to try to use their connection as a bridge. And he told it what he needed it to do: hold steady. Be itself, its current self, what it had become, and not be pulled back toward what it had been when Riddle made it. The fragment listened. He could feel it processing the information with that particular quality of deep internal engagement that he'd learned to distinguish from silence. It wasn't silent when it was thinking. It was a different kind of hum, active, turning. On the 5th night, 2 days before Lucius Malfoy was due to arrive, something new happened. He was in bed, talking to the fragment in the dark, explaining the plan one more time, the bathroom, the interception, the conversation he was going to try to have, and he paused, and in the pause the fragment did something it had never done before. It spoke. Not in words. Not quite. But not just a feeling either, something between the two, the way a piece of music can carry a meaning without being a sentence. It came through the scar with a warmth that was sharper than usual, more deliberate, with a directional quality, toward Harry, as distinct from the ambient presence, and what it communicated was, translated as precisely as he could manage: I will not let it take me back. He lay still for a moment. I know, he said. I know you won't. Another pulse. Warmer. And then, more tentatively, something he translated as, what happens to me after? He was quiet for a long moment. The question Hermione had raised. The one he hadn't answered. I don't know yet, he said, honestly. But whatever you become, you'll be genuinely yourself. Not a fragment. Not an anchor. Not a weapon. He paused. I think that's worth not knowing the rest of it yet. The warmth settled. Steady. Something that was acceptance, or as close to acceptance as a 10-year-old piece of adapted dark magic could get. He slept. The 29th arrived. Lucius Malfoy came to Hogwarts at 2 in the afternoon with 4 other governors, all of whom had the specific energy of people who have been given reason to be important and are fully inhabiting it. The governors' meeting was held in a conference room off the entrance hall that Harry had never been in and had no intention of entering. He watched the arrival from the first-floor landing, Malfoy Sr. in his expensive robes, silver-headed walking cane, the particular posture of a man who believes architecture should rearrange itself to accommodate his presence. Dobby, the house elf, was barely visible behind him, small, enormous-eyed, nervous in every line of his body with the specific misery of someone who is punished for existing imperfectly. Harry watched Dobby. The elf was carrying a bag, a proper bag, sized for documents, the kind of thing you'd bring to a governor's meeting. Nothing unusual about it. But Dobby kept touching the bag's strap with 2 fingers, a small repetitive gesture, and the gesture had the quality of someone maintaining contact with something important. The diary was in the bag. Harry had maybe 6 hours before the meeting ended and Malfoy went looking for an opportunity to move the diary closer to the chamber. The question was where Dobby would go during the meeting. House elves didn't sit in governors' meetings. They waited somewhere. He went to find Hermione. Kitchen, she said immediately, before he finished explaining. House elves go to the kitchen when they're waiting. There's a connection between Hogwarts' kitchen and the rest of the castle. The house elves can apparate between any room they have access to, but their default waiting place when accompanying a visiting. Can you find out which part of the kitchen? Harry said. I know someone who can, she said. There was a pause. I've been making friends with the house elves for the past 3 weeks. Ron looked at her. They're being treated terribly, she said with complete composure. And they're also a very useful source of information. Right, Harry said. How fast? 10 minutes, she said, and left. She was back in 8. Dobby is in the West Corridor kitchen annex, she said. Alone. He's been told to stay there until called. Is there anyone else? 3 other elves, but they're working the lunch prep for tomorrow. Different end of the kitchen entirely. She paused. Harry. If you're going to intercept the diary, it needs to be now, while it's still in the bag, before Malfoy has a chance to instruct Dobby on the delivery. If Dobby gets the delivery instruction, he's bound to follow it. Elf magic under a direct order from their master is, the compulsion is essentially irresistible. So I need to get to Dobby before Malfoy gives the instruction, Harry said. Yes. He looked at Ron. Come with me. Obviously, Ron said. The kitchen annex was a long low room that smelled of bread and something herbal, with copper pots stacked along one wall and a small fire burning low at the far end. Dobby was sitting on a wooden stool near the fire, the bag on the floor beside him, his enormous eyes fixed on his own hands, which were twisted together in the specific way of a creature used to physical self-punishment as a form of emotional regulation. When Harry and Ron came in, Dobby looked up, and his eyes went wide. Harry Potter, Dobby breathed. The name carried an extraordinary weight of reverence and terror in equal measure. Hello, Dobby, Harry said. He kept his voice easy. He crouched down to the elf's eye level, which felt both right and slightly unusual. I'm not here to get you in trouble. Dobby's eyes immediately filled with tears. Dobby is already in much trouble, he whispered. Dobby is not wanting to do what Dobby has been told to do. But Dobby cannot, his master, the binding is very, he stopped. One hand moved toward his own ear as if to punish himself, and Harry reached out and gently caught the elf's wrist. Don't, Harry said. Dobby stared at his own wrist in Harry's hand with an expression of complete bewilderment. I know what's in the bag, Harry said. The diary. Dobby went rigid. I know your master has told you what to do with it, Harry said. I'm not going to make you break that instruction. I understand that you can't. He paused. He'd thought about this specific problem, the elf compulsion, for 2 days, and the solution he'd arrived at was not ideal but it was the best available. But I'm going to tell you something. And I want you to remember it. Can you remember something without telling your master you know it? Dobby, the elf whispered. Dobby can keep a secret. If Dobby is careful. If Dobby does not, if his master does not ask directly, he won't ask you this, Harry said. This isn't a question he'll think to ask. He paused. The diary is dangerous. Your master knows this. That's why he wants it at Hogwarts. But what's inside the diary, the soul fragment, it's connected to something inside me. He touched his scar. And I need to talk to what's in that diary before your master's plan activates. Before the diary reaches the chamber. Dobby was crying now, silently, tears running down his pillowcase-draped front. Harry Potter is in danger, he whispered. Dobby has been trying to warn, this is why Dobby, he stopped. Pressed his mouth shut. The binding clearly prevented some of what he wanted to say. I know, Harry said. You've been trying to warn me. I know. He looked at the bag. I'm going to ask you for one thing that isn't breaking your master's instruction. One thing that lives in the gap between what he told you to do and what he didn't tell you not to do. Dobby looked at him with eyes like twin moons. Your master told you to put the diary somewhere in the school, Harry said. Near the chamber. He didn't tell you to put it there by any specific time, did he? Just before the end of the governor's meeting. Dobby's mouth moved. He was checking something internal, the terms of the instruction, the binding's exact language. The master said, before he leaves today, but not when, Harry said. Not what time. Another internal check. Not the exact time, Dobby said, barely audible. So you have, the whole afternoon, Harry said. And if you happen to go to the second-floor bathroom he looked at Ron, who held up 4 fingers. At 4 o'clock. And if, in the corridor outside that bathroom, you happen to encounter me. And if you happen to show me what was in the bag before you put it down, not give it to me, not hand it over, just show it to me, that would not be breaking your master's instruction. Dobby's enormous eyes were doing something extraordinary. Hope, Harry thought. The specific terrified kind of hope that only appears in things that have spent a very long time without much reason for it. Harry Potter is very clever, Dobby whispered. Dobby thinks he might be able to do this thing. 4 o'clock, Harry said. He stood up. Thank you, Dobby. He left with Ron, who was quiet until they were back in the main corridor and then said, you just used a technicality in an ancient magical binding to get a house elf to show you a Horcrux. Yes, Harry said. You thought of that in 2 days. I had help, Harry said, which was true. Hermione had identified the compulsion's legal language nature, which had given Harry the angle. It's still impressive, Ron said. Slightly terrifying. I'll take both, Harry said. The second-floor girls' bathroom at 4 o'clock. It was empty at this time of day. Hermione had been right about that. It was between class periods and the prefect rounds didn't hit this corridor until 6, and it had a specific atmosphere that Harry had not expected. Not just a bathroom. It had the quality of a space that had absorbed decades of a particular kind of sadness, the sadness, he realized, of Myrtle, the ghost who occupied this place, Myrtle who had died here 50 years ago because Tom Riddle had opened the chamber and she had been standing in the wrong place at the wrong moment and had spent every year since then exactly here, in the place where she died, unable to leave. She was there now, transparent and self-pitying in the way of ghosts who have had decades to refine a grievance into a personality. She looked at Harry and Ron and Hermione when they came in with an expression that began as annoyance and shifted, looking at Harry, into something between recognition and sorrow. You're Harry Potter, she said. Yes, Harry said. The hat, yes. She drifted closer. Up close, Myrtle had the specific quality of someone who had been 14 for 50 years, all the intensity of that age with none of the possibility of growing past it, the emotions enormous and immediate and without the softening that time and development eventually provide. He killed me, she said, without drama. Just fact. Tom Riddle. He opened the chamber and the basilisk. I heard a voice, a terrible voice, and I came out of the stall to see what was happening and then I died. I'm sorry, Harry said, and meant it. Everyone's sorry, she said. Being sorry doesn't do much, as a rule. She looked at his scar. Something of him is in you. Yes. I can feel it, she said. From here. It has his texture. She paused. But different. Like the same music in a different key. Yes, Harry said, and thought that Myrtle's 50 years in this bathroom had given her a very precise sensitivity to the specific signature of Riddle's soul. Myrtle. I'm going to need the bathroom to be empty for the next hour. She looked at him. Something is happening tonight. Something I need privacy for, he said. She drifted for a moment, weighing this. Then, I'll stay in my stall, she said. I won't watch. A pause. But I want to know afterward. What happened? I want to know. I'll tell you, Harry said. She vanished into the end stall with a small splash. A moment later, Hermione pulled the bathroom door open slightly and checked the corridor, empty, and Ron took the position she'd identified, the alcove 20 feet down that had a sightline to the door. If anyone was coming, he'd whistle. Harry stood in front of the row of sinks. The one with the snake tap was third from the left, small, tarnished bronze, a serpent coiled around the handle. He looked at it. The entrance to the Chamber of Secrets, sealed for 50 years, closed since the night Myrtle died in this bathroom, and Tom Riddle walked out of it with a diary in his hand that contained a piece of his soul. The door opened. Dobby came in. The elf was shaking. His hands on the bag strap were white-knuckled, and his enormous eyes were wet and terrified, and also, underneath the terror, holding something that looked like the specific dignity of a creature doing the most courageous thing it has ever done. He opened the bag. The diary was inside. Black leather, no name. Just as the dreams had shown it, and at the moment of seeing it, the fragment in Harry's chest came alive so sharply it nearly took his breath away. Not like the warmth of recent weeks. Like the feeling of recognizing something across a very large room. Recognition at frequency, old and immediate and mutual. There you are, the fragment seemed to say, in its non-language way, its warmth shifting into something more complex, more careful. There it is, Harry thought back. He looked at Dobby. Can I hold it? Dobby's hands trembled. He lifted the diary from the bag. He held it out. The moment Harry touched it, the world narrowed. Not a vision. Not the dramatic storm of a prophecy or a possession. Something quieter and more precise, like being in a room where a second conversation is happening just below the audible threshold. The diary in his hands and the fragment in his chest, and the connection between them running like a live wire, and on the other end of the wire, something awake. Something that felt him touch the diary and pulled toward the touch with an urgency that was very close to pain. It's active, Hermione said from behind him, and he realized his hands were glowing faintly, not the diary, not the scar, but the place where his palms touched the leather, a dim blue-white luminescence that came from the contact between the two fragments across the medium of his body. I know, he said. Harry, I've got it, he said. Dobby. Thank you. You can go. Dobby did not go. Dobby stood with his hands pressed to his mouth and his tears running freely, frozen between instruction and his own choice. Go, Harry said, gently. You've done something extraordinary today. Go back and wait, and when your master calls for you, tell him you placed it as instructed. He paused. I'll handle what happens after. Dobby looked at him for one more moment, all of his love and terror and desperate hope compressed into those lamp-like eyes, and then he was gone with the soft crack of apparition. Harry stood in the bathroom with the diary in his hands and felt the fragment pulling toward it like a compass needle toward north, and he took a breath, and he opened it. The pages were blank. Of course they were, that was the point of a diary that was a Horcrux. Whatever was inside wasn't on the surface. It was waiting. He picked up the quill he'd brought. He wrote, I know what you are. The ink dried. Nothing happened. He waited. Then, slowly, as if rising from depth, ink bloomed on the page below his words, not his ink, different ink, darker, more deliberate, and I know what you are. His pulse moved. All right, he said aloud, to the fragment in him as much as the fragment in the diary. Here we go. He wrote, You've been in that diary for 50 years. The response came faster, You've been in that boy for 10 years. Perhaps you understand, then. Better than you know, Harry said, and wrote, I do understand. I've been thinking about you for weeks. A longer pause. Then, why? Because we're the same, Harry wrote. Made in the same moment. From the same source. Except I've had 10 years inside a person and you've had 50 years inside an object. And whatever that's done to both of us, we're not what we were. The pause was very long this time. The fragment in his chest was pulling so hard toward the diary that Harry had the physical sensation of leaning into it without moving. Then the diary wrote, "He will come for me. When he has a body again. He will use me to open the chamber." "I know," Harry wrote. "That's why I'm here. Before he can. You cannot stop him." "I'm not trying to stop him through you," Harry wrote. "I'm trying to give you a choice." Another long pause. The blue-white luminescence around his hands had intensified. "What choice?" Harry wrote, "The same choice I've been working toward for 10 years. To not be what we were made to be. To not be his." He paused. He could feel the fragment in him reaching, genuinely reaching, as distinct from its recent settled warmth, a real active extension of itself toward the diary fragment, like a hand held out. "Help me," he said aloud, not sure if he was saying it to the fragment or to himself or to both of them. "Help me reach it." The warmth in his chest surged. And something came through the connection, not words, not even a feeling exactly, but a totality of experience. 10 years of living. The cupboard, yes, but also the first taste of treacle tart, the first time a spell worked, the feel of a broomstick at altitude, the fierce warmth of Ron's grin after a Quidditch win, Hermione pulling a book from nowhere with both hands and complete composure, McGonagall's impossible 2mm nod of approval, Snape saying "You are possibly the cleverest" approach I could have imagined in the precise tone of a man paying the most significant compliment he knows how to give. 10 years of life in a cupboard and then in a world that opened like a door, and somewhere in all of it, in the lived texture of it, the thing the fragment had become, not Riddle. Something new. Something that had been small and dark and cold and had learned, slowly, by proximity, by sheer accumulation of experience, what it felt like to be warm. He pushed all of it through the connection. Sent it into the diary. The pages went white. Not blank, white, actively white, the way a screen goes white when too much light hits it, and Harry felt the diary fragment receive what he'd sent and he felt it process the transmission with a shock that was almost physical, the shock of something that has been completely alone for 50 years suddenly receiving 50 years of a life it never had, in a single overwhelming transfer. The diary shook in his hands. "Harry," Hermione said sharply. The scar, he felt it. Heat. Not the warm heat of the fragment's recent communications, something much more intense, a searing concentrated point at the lightning bolt mark, and he knew what it was, the resistance. Not the diary fragment's resistance. Something further away. A presence at the end of a very long line, barely conscious, barely functional, but present and fighting and very aware that something was happening to its instrument. Voldemort. Feeling the diary through his main soul. Pushing back. Harry had perhaps 30 seconds before the push became something worse. He pressed both hands flat against the open pages of the diary and he looked at his own reflection in the blank white surface and he said, aloud, clearly, without performance, "I'm not asking you to stop existing. I'm asking you to stop being his. You've been waiting for 50 years to be something else. This is the chance. Choose it." The white pages pulsed. Hermione was reading something aloud behind him, the manuscript. She'd brought a copy, her voice was steady and precise and carrying the text of the 1847 author's central passage, "Both must choose freely. Both must choose freely. Both must." The fragment in Harry's chest made its sound, the not quite sound, the acknowledgement, but amplified, fully present, everything it had been building toward for 10 years arriving in a single moment of complete clarity, and it reached for the diary fragment through the connection between them, and Harry felt the diary fragment reach back, and what the reach felt like was this: "I choose." The diary's pages turned black. All of them, instantaneously, as if every surface had been inked over, and then the blackness cracked, spiderwebbing from the center outward, and from the cracks came a pale light that was nothing like the warm blue-white of the fragment connection, more like the light inside something very old and very cold breaking open, and then it stopped. The diary fell apart in his hands. Not burning, not dissolving, just coming apart along its spine, the pages separating, the cover falling open, the leather splitting. Within 5 seconds he was holding a pile of old black pages and a piece of split leather, and in between his palms, where the glow had been, there was nothing. Harry stood very still. He checked the fragment. It was there. Still there. The warmth, steady and present, and something different about it now, something that felt like having just done a hard thing and come out the other side. Not diminished. Not traumatized. Something closer to, resolved. Did it? Hermione started. The diary fragment is gone, Harry said. The fragment in the diary chose release. He paused. I think my fragment helped it. Showed it what choosing could feel like. And the diary? Harry looked at the destroyed pages in his hands. Destroyed. The fragment chose to leave, and when it left, he thought about what the author had said, beyond magical repair. The container couldn't hold the choice. It came apart. Hermione let out a long, slow breath. She sat down on the edge of a sink. That actually worked, she said, with the tone of someone who had believed it would work and is still somewhat stunned that it did. Yes, Harry said. Where did the fragment go? She said. The diary's fragment. When it released. I don't know, Harry said. It passed through me. Through our connection. And then, he felt inward at the place where the contact had been. Gone. Into, wherever separated soul fragments go, when there's nothing left to anchor them. Do you think it? I don't know, he said, honestly. I hope it went somewhere it could finally be done being Riddle. The bathroom was very quiet. From the end stall came a small sound. Myrtle, who had promised not to watch and clearly hadn't been able to fully commit to that promise, making a sound that was half sob and half something much harder to name. Not grief exactly. Something more like recognition. The sound of someone watching the beginning of an undoing of the thing that had killed them. Myrtle, Harry said. The ghost drifted out of the stall. She was looking at him with the vast, complicated eyes of someone who has been 14 and heartbroken for 50 years. It's gone, she said. Whatever was in that diary. I could feel it. All this time, I could feel it here, in this bathroom, underneath the floor, in the chamber. I didn't know what it was. Just, his presence. Down there. She looked at the floor, then back at Harry. It's quieter now. I know, Harry said. It's done. She drifted for a moment. Then she said, Are you going to do the same thing to the one in you? Eventually, Harry said. Does it want to go? She asked. And the question was genuine. Myrtle, who had been asking questions about her own unwilling entrapment in this bathroom for 50 years, asking whether the fragment had a choice, whether the choice was something it wanted. I think so, Harry said. I think it's getting ready. She nodded. She drifted back toward her stall. At the entrance she stopped. He was very handsome, she said, without looking back. Tom Riddle. When he was 16. I thought, before I knew, I thought he was the most extraordinary person I'd ever seen. A pause. He was. He just wasn't kind. She went back into her stall. Thank you, Harry Potter. For quieting it. Harry set the pages of the destroyed diary down in the sink. They dissolved in the water, not burning, just softening, the ink blooming out, the paper coming apart, until there was nothing left but faintly darkened water running down the drain. He turned to Hermione. One down, he said. She looked at him. Her eyes were very bright and there was something in her face that was enormously proud and also enormously scared, in the way of someone looking at the first step of something very long. How many left? 5, he said. Not counting me. Can we do them the same way? I don't know, he said. The diary worked because my fragment had a direct connection to it. The other Horcruxes Dumbledore suspects, they'll be different. Objects. No living host. No 10 years of development. The fragment in the diary could choose because it had my fragment to show it what choosing looked like. He paused. The others won't have that. Different method, she said. Different method, he agreed. Ron was in the doorway. He'd heard something and come to check, and was looking between them and the sink where the diary had been with the expression of a person arriving just after the main event and processing the aftermath. It worked, he said. It worked, Hermione said. And Harry is, still here, Harry said. Fragment and all. Ron exhaled. Leaned against the doorframe. Right, he said. Brilliant. Terrifying. Brilliant. He looked at Harry. Dumbledore doesn't know this happened yet. No, Harry said. When he finds out, he'll find out tonight, Harry said. When Malfoy calls for Dobby and Dobby reports the diary placed as instructed and then Malfoy goes to check and finds nothing. He paused. And then Malfoy goes to Dumbledore. Or Dumbledore comes to me. He picked up his bag. Either way, we're ready. He walked out of the bathroom with the remnants of one Horcrux dissolving in the sink behind him and 5 more somewhere in the world and one inside him that was running warm and steady and ready. He felt, in his chest, the fragment. It pulsed once. Like a heartbeat. One down, it seemed to say. One down, Harry agreed. Chapter 6, The broadcast heard round the world. Dumbledore came to Harry at 9 o'clock that evening. Not a letter. Not an owl. Dumbledore himself, appearing in the doorway of the Gryffindor common room with a quietness that the fat lady had apparently not contested, possibly because Dumbledore was the headmaster and the fat lady had institutional respect for authority, or possibly because Dumbledore's quality of presence made objection feel beside the point. Harry had been expecting him. He was sitting in the armchair by the fire with his journal open and his legs crossed and the specific composure of someone who has done a very significant thing and has had 6 hours to settle into having done it. Ron was on the sofa with a chocolate frog card, Merlin, this time, which he'd been trying to get since September, and Hermione was in the chair across, reading a book she'd been on the same page of for 40 minutes because she kept listening to the common room door. When Dumbledore appeared, the common room went quiet in the particular way of a group of people who suddenly remember that adults exist and that the specific adults standing in doorways matter. Percy Weasley stood up automatically. Several fourth years made their essays look more industrious than they were. Harry, Dumbledore said. A word, if you have a moment. Of course, Harry said. He stood, unhurried. Looked at Ron and Hermione. Give me an hour. Hermione nodded. Ron gave Dumbledore a careful, measuring look, the look of someone who has significantly revised his assessment of authority over the past 3 months, and then looked at Harry and nodded too. Harry followed Dumbledore out. They walked. Not to Dumbledore's office, Harry noticed this. They walked the long corridor that ran along the north face of the castle, the one with the windows that looked out over the dark grounds and the black shape of the lake, and the walk had the quality of 2 people who have been circling something and are now, finally, approaching it directly. Dumbledore was quiet for the first 2 minutes. Harry let him be quiet. Lucius Malfoy, Dumbledore said eventually, came to me this evening in considerable distress. I'd imagine, Harry said. The diary he brought to the school appears to have been, Dumbledore paused. Destroyed. The Horcrux within it eliminated. The fragment gone. He walked. He accused the school of carelessness. I suspect he knew it wasn't carelessness. It wasn't, Harry agreed. Another pause. He said the elf placed it as instructed. He couldn't understand. Dobby didn't do anything wrong, Harry said. He placed it exactly where he was told to place it. The issue is that I was there first. Dumbledore stopped walking. Harry stopped beside him. Outside the window, the lake was a sheet of black glass under a sky that had gone completely clear since the morning's clouds, every star visible, the kind of sky that makes the world feel very small and very large simultaneously. Harry, Dumbledore said. Not warmly. Not the managed warmth, not the careful elder statesman register. Something stripped and direct. What did you do? What needed doing, Harry said. The diary was Riddle's first Horcrux. Created in 1943. The fragment inside it had been isolated for 50 years and was volatile and being actively used by Lucius Malfoy as a tool to reintroduce Voldemort's influence into this school. He paused. So I eliminated it. How? The method in the 1847 manuscript, Harry said. The one you filed and didn't share. He looked at Dumbledore steadily. Voluntary extraction. The fragment in the diary chose release. With some assistance from the fragment in me. He let that sit. It worked, Professor. Your 50-year certainty that it couldn't work, was wrong. Dumbledore looked at him for a long time. The starlight through the window was thin and cold and made the headmaster's face look very old and very human in a way that his warmth and performance usually smoothed over. You used the connection between your fragment and the diary's fragment, Dumbledore said slowly. Yes. And the diary fragment chose release. The words had the quality of someone handling something they don't fully have language for yet. Voluntarily. Yes. Harry. Dumbledore turned fully toward him. His hands were at his sides, which was unusual, normally they were folded or occupied with something. A soul fragment choosing release, choosing, genuinely, to stop being an anchor, that is not a thing I believed possible. Not because the theory didn't allow it. Because the preconditions, the development of a fragment to the point where genuine choice is possible, I didn't believe those preconditions would ever exist. They existed in me for the past 3 months, Harry said. And they existed in the diary fragment through its connection to me. I brought the preconditions to it. He paused. The same way I'm going to bring them to the fragment inside me. When it's ready. When it's ready, Dumbledore repeated. Not when you're ready. Both, Harry said. But it's getting there. Faster than I expected. He paused. The diary situation accelerated something. Reaching through the connection, transmitting the experience of what it felt like to have a life, the fragment in me was part of that. It felt the diary fragment choose. I think seeing that reflected back, seeing what choosing looks like from the outside, he paused. I think it moved something. Dumbledore was quiet for a long time. Then, the other Horcruxes. 5 left, Harry said. Not counting me. You said you suspected 6 deliberate ones. We've confirmed 1 and destroyed it. The others are different, Dumbledore said. They are objects with no living host. No development. No adapted character. He looked at Harry. The method you use tonight will not work on a locket or a cup or a ring. I know, Harry said. Different method for the others. Probably the conventional methods, basilisk venom, fiendfire. The fragment in the diary could choose. The fragment in a ring that's been sitting in a box has nothing like the architecture for choice. He paused. Those, we destroy conventionally. But those aren't the urgent problem. No, Dumbledore agreed quietly. I am the urgent problem, Harry said. And the method for me, the voluntary extraction, it's viable. I've proven it's viable. Which means your plan, the version that ends with my death, is no longer the only option. He looked at Dumbledore directly. It's no longer an option at all. Not if I have anything to say about it. A long silence. What will you do, Dumbledore said, with the fragment after extraction? It will be, loose. An independent entity with no anchor. A piece of adapted soul with 10 years of your personality and an origin in the darkest wizard of the age. He paused. That is not a small problem. I know, Harry said. I've been thinking about it. He had been. In the runs before breakfast, in the spaces between occlumency and library sessions, in the quiet of the dormitory after the fragment had communicated something new and he was still processing it. I think it needs somewhere to go. Not an object, we've seen what isolation in an object does to a fragment. Somewhere living. Somewhere it can continue to be what it's become. He paused. I have some ideas. They need more work. I would like to hear them, Dumbledore said. When you have more work. It was not a command. It was not the gentle management of an elder directing a younger. It was the request of someone who has spent 50 years as the only person in the room thinking about a problem and has just discovered someone thinking about it more accurately. I'll tell you when I'm ready, Harry said. Not before. Dumbledore nodded. He turned back to the window. The lake was still black glass, the stars still cold. Harry, he said. I owe you an apology. Not a small one. He paused. Many years of decisions made on your behalf, without your knowledge or consent, based on a theory about what was necessary that turned out to be incorrect. He was quiet. I do not ask you to forgive me quickly. I ask you to understand that what I did was done from a genuine belief that it was the only viable path. And that I am discovering, at 110 years old, that my certainty about what is possible has some significant gaps. Harry looked at him. The apology was real. He could feel its realness the way you feel weather. It had mass, it had presence, it occupied the space between them with genuine weight. He thought about what McGonagall had said, a man so accustomed to being correct that the distinction between I have concluded this is right and this is right has become difficult to see. He thought about 10 years in a cupboard under the stairs. He thought about what it cost Dumbledore to say what he just said, given who he was. I understand, Harry said. I don't forgive it yet. But I understand it. Dumbledore inclined his head. That's more than I have any right to ask for. They stood at the window for another moment. Then Harry said, Malfoy. He knows the diary is gone. He knows I did it. Yes. What's he going to do? Recalibrate, Dumbledore said, with the tone of someone who has known Lucius Malfoy for a long time and has a precisely calibrated contempt for him. He will report to whatever remains of Voldemort. He will tell him the diary is destroyed and that you did it. He paused. Voldemort will know the extraction method works. He will know the fragment in you is closer to release than he anticipated. He'll try to accelerate, Harry said. Yes. His timeline for getting a body moves up, Harry said. Whatever plan he has, whoever he's been using, it gets urgent. Yes, Dumbledore said. Which is why, he stopped. Started again. I have been monitoring a situation. There is a person at this school who is connected to Voldemort more directly than I have disclosed. He looked at Harry. Quirinus Quirrell. I know, Harry said. Dumbledore blinked. The fragment told me, Harry said. Every class. The fragment has a strong reaction to Quirrell, not just aesthetic disgust at bad theory, something more personal. Something recognizing something. He paused. Voldemort is on the back of Quirrell's head. The silence was remarkable. Under the turban, Harry said. He's been there all term. How long have you known this? Dumbledore said, and for the first time this term, possibly for the first time in a very long time, Albus Dumbledore sounded genuinely surprised. 3 weeks, Harry said. I wasn't sure enough until recently. The fragment's reactions have been getting more specific. He looked at Dumbledore. You knew too. Or suspected. I suspected, Dumbledore said. I did not know with certainty. He's trying to get to the Philosopher's Stone, Harry said. The one you've hidden here. In the school. I've worked out where. He watched Dumbledore's face. 3rd floor corridor. The one you warned us away from on the first day. The surprised expression on Dumbledore's face was doing something extraordinary. It was transitioning into something Harry had genuinely not seen before from him, something that might be described as awe, though in Dumbledore's specifically restrained way that meant a very precise adjustment of the eyes. "You've worked out the stone," he said. "You told us not to go there," Harry said. "Which told me there was something worth finding. And you have a known connection to Nicholas Flamel through your collaborative research in the 1940s. When I looked up Flamel, he shrugged slightly. "It wasn't difficult. For you," Dumbledore said, with a quality that was, possibly, the beginning of a laugh, held back by the gravity of the situation. "For most 11-year-olds, Quirrell is going to make an attempt," Harry said. "Soon. The diary being destroyed, it'll make Voldemort urgent. He'll push Quirrell to move." He paused. "So we need to decide what we're doing about that." "We," Dumbledore said. "Yes," Harry said. "We. You and me and the people I'm working with." He met Dumbledore's eyes. "You don't have a plan anymore that doesn't include me as an active participant rather than a managed variable. That's the new situation. Are you all right with the new situation?" A long pause. And then Dumbledore did laugh, not the comfortable public laugh, not the warm performance, but something smaller and private and genuinely felt. "I am," he said. Rather unexpectedly. He paused. "I am, Harry." They went to Dumbledore's office. Not for the first time, but for the first time as something more like equals, Harry sitting across from the desk rather than in front of it, the posture different, the power distribution different, both of them aware of the shift. McGonagall was already there, which suggested Dumbledore had had the foresight to send for her before coming to find Harry. She was in the chair by the fire and she looked at Harry when he came in with an expression of complete composure over the top of a very carefully suppressed relief. Snape was there too. Standing. He was always standing. Harry suspected Snape regarded sitting in a shared space as a form of vulnerability. Harry took this in, and thought, the people who know. Dumbledore, who had known the longest and been most wrong about what to do with it. McGonagall, who had found out by her own routes and chosen to act. Snape, who had reasoned it out and chosen to protect. And Harry, who had found out in the loudest possible way and chosen to solve it. 4 people in a circular office with a phoenix on a perch and 52 years of accumulated secret between them. "Quirrell," Harry said, as he sat down. Snape's chin lifted by 2 degrees. "You told him," he said to Dumbledore. "Harry told me," Dumbledore said mildly. Snape looked at Harry. His dark eyes were doing the recalibration that Harry had come to recognize as Snape's version of respect. "How long?" Snape said. 3 weeks that I was confident," Harry said. "Before that, suspected." "The fragment," Snape said. "Yes." Snape absorbed this. "I have been watching Quirrell since September," he said. "The Dark Lord's presence on him is, detectable, to someone who knows the signs." He paused. "I did not know that you had independently confirmed it." "I was going to tell you," Harry said. "This week." "I see," Snape said, which in his register covered a considerable range of response. McGonagall set down the cup she'd been holding. "Quirrell is going to make an attempt on the stone," she said. "When?" "Soon," Harry said. "The diary's destruction is going to accelerate his timeline. Voldemort knows the extraction method works. He knows I'm not going to be the passive instrument he planned for." He paused. "He's going to push Quirrell to get the stone before I can, before anything else changes in his favor." "The protections on the stone," McGonagall said, looking at Dumbledore. "Are robust," Dumbledore said. "But not, perhaps, designed to stop someone with access to the knowledge of a very experienced dark wizard." He paused. "The Devil's Snare, the chess game, the potions, they were designed as deterrents to students. Not as an absolute barrier to Voldemort." "So we add a barrier," Harry said. "A real one." "How?" McGonagall said. Harry looked at the fire. He'd been thinking about this since the bathroom, since the walk back from the second floor with the diary dissolved in the sink behind him and the knowledge of Quirrell's timeline sitting like a clock in his chest. "I'll go through," he said. "Tonight, or tomorrow at the latest. Through the trapdoor and the protections. Not to get the stone, to wait. At the end. Where the stone is." "You're 11 years old," Snape said, with the tone of someone who has said this before and found it insufficient and is saying it again anyway. "I can get through the protections," Harry said. "The chess game, Ron is better at chess than anyone in this school, I'll bring him. The Devil's Snare, Hermione knows exactly what it is and how to counter it. I've been doing occlumency with you for 2 months, which means my mind is better protected against possession attempts than anyone else in this building. And the fragment," he paused. "The fragment will know when Voldemort is near. Better than any detection spell." He looked at Snape. "I am the best option you have. Not the most comfortable one. The best one." Snape looked at him for a long moment. Then, without any particular expression, he said, "The potions challenge at the end. 7 bottles. The puzzle is logical, not magical. You'll need to solve it to proceed. Can you give me the framework?" Harry said. Snape produced a piece of parchment from somewhere in his robes and handed it over. It was already written. He'd been waiting for this conversation, Harry understood, for longer than tonight. "I was not going to let you go unprepared," Snape said, and turned away before Harry could respond, which was the Snape equivalent of a full declaration. McGonagall stood. "I'm coming with you," she said. "To the trapdoor." After that, she looked at Harry. "After that, the 3 of you are better equipped than I am for what's inside." She said it with the precision of someone who has genuinely evaluated the tactical situation and arrived at an accurate conclusion that also happens to be uncomfortable. "But I'll be at the entrance. And if anything goes wrong, nothing will go wrong," Harry said. Not bravado. Statement. Dumbledore had been watching all of this with the quiet of someone who has spent 50 years being the person who made all the plans and is experiencing, for the first time, the specific relief of watching someone else take the weight. "Harry," he said. "Before you go. There is something I want to give you." He crossed to his desk. Opened the bottom drawer. Removed something folded, cloth, silvery, moving like liquid in the firelight, and held it out. Harry took it. "Your father's," Dumbledore said. "I have been keeping it. I had intended to give it to you at a time of my choosing." He paused. "I find that my choosing is less relevant than it used to be." Harry unfolded it. The invisibility cloak was exactly what the name promised. Holding it was like holding a piece of captured light, liquid silver and weightless and completely, perfectly transparent. He looked through it and saw his own hands disappear. "Thank you," he said, and meant it fully, without the complicated undercurrent of the earlier thank yous. "Your father would have approved," Dumbledore said. "Of all of it. I think." He paused. "I think your mother would have been 3 steps ahead of everyone and quietly furious, which I mean as the highest possible compliment." Snape, at the window, made a sound that was not quite audible. They went that night. Harry, Ron, Hermione, and the invisibility cloak that could cover all 3 of them when they pressed close, which they did through the corridor to the 3rd floor, through the locked door that McGonagall opened with a touch. She was as good as her word, standing at the entrance with her wand out and her face set, and down through the trapdoor into the dark. The Devil's Snare was exactly where it should be, enormous and dark and reactive to movement, and Hermione hit it with a light charm before it had fully registered their presence, her voice calm and precise in the dark, Lumos Maxima, and the vines recoiled from the light with the offended urgency of a thing that prefers shadows. They dropped through. The winged keys were chaos, a room full of them, hundreds, all sizes and colors, one with a crumpled wing that was the right one, and Harry flew the broomstick while Ron and Hermione watched from the floor, and Harry felt the fragment give him the same directional pulse it had used with the bludger, there, left, higher, and he snatched the key in 12 seconds flat, which Ron said afterward was absurd and Harry chose not to argue with. The chess game was Ron's. Harry had known it would be Ron's from the moment he'd seen the board. Ron stood in front of it and went still in the specific way Harry had learned to recognize, the way Ron went still when his brain was doing something that his casual exterior never suggested it was capable of, and then started moving pieces with the focused ease of someone who has been playing strategy games since before he could properly read. "Knight to e5, he said. "You two, take those squares, stay off the board until I say." He moved 3 pieces with a clarity that was almost beautiful and said, "Scholars mate variation, modified," and 4 moves later the opposing king tipped itself over. "Ron," Hermione said. "It's not that impressive," Ron said, but he was grinning. "It's extremely impressive," Harry said. The troll was already unconscious, Dumbledore's work, Harry suspected, preparation in advance. They went past it without stopping. The potions room. 7 bottles. Snape's parchment. Hermione solved it in 4 minutes, working through the logic with the rapid-fire precision of someone for whom puzzles of this type are a form of rest. Smallest bottle, forward, the round bottle, back, and Harry took the smallest, round bottle, and drank it, and felt the fire barrier ahead become something he could step through. He looked at them both. "Wait here," he said. "If I'm not back in 20 minutes, we're coming in," Ron said. "The potion only sends 1 forward," Hermione said, but she said it to acknowledge the constraint rather than to agree with waiting. "We'll manage. Go." He went through the fire. The last room was not what he expected. Not a vault, not a chamber, not the dramatic architecture of something designed to impress. Just a room. Stone floor, low ceiling, a mirror standing against the far wall, enormous, ornate framed, the surface glimmering with that specific quality of enchanted mirrors that are doing something significant. And Quirrell, standing in front of it. Not waiting for Harry. Not aware of Harry yet, he was standing with his hands extended toward the mirror's surface and the muttering had the quality of a man being instructed by something, receiving commands from something very close to his own head. Harry walked in. He didn't hide. He didn't use the cloak. He walked in and let his footsteps sound on the stone and Quirrell turned around. The turban was slightly askew. Beneath one edge of it, the faintest suggestion of a face, not Quirrell's face, something worse, something ancient and furious and barely present but present enough. The fragment in Harry's chest surged, recognition and revulsion and something that was not quite fear and not quite rage but the specific response of something that had spent 10 years being a small adapted piece of this presence and was now encountering the original and finding it unrecognizable. Like meeting the creature whose shape you'd escaped. "Potter," Quirrell said. His voice had a double quality, Quirrell's stammer gone, something else underneath. "Professor," Harry said. "You've been, quite the complication," Quirrell said. "The diary. That was, unexpected." "I expect there'll be more unexpected things before we're done," Harry said. He looked at the mirror. "You can't get the stone from it." "The mirror shows what you desire," Quirrell said. "I desire the stone." "I should be able to, you desire to give it to Voldemort," Harry said. "That's not the same as desiring it for yourself. The mirror knows the difference." He walked forward, slowly, watching Quirrell's hands. "It'll give it to someone who wants to find it but not use it." Quirrell's eyes narrowed. "Step away." "No," Harry said. "I will," Quirrell started, and the thing on the back of his head said something. Harry heard it as a pressure behind his scar, not words, a command, and Quirrell raised his wand. The fragment detonated. That was the only word for it. Detonated, not outward but inward, a surge of everything it had been accumulating for 10 years, the warmth and the development and the 10 years of being shaped by a life, all of it compressed and released in a single instant of protective response, and what it did to Harry was this, it made him a wall. Not a shield charm. Not a spell. Something older and more fundamental, the specific defensive magic of a soul that has decided it is not going to let the thing it has become be taken apart by the thing that made it. The fragment threw itself against the connection Voldemort was trying to use, the scar channel, the link between main soul and fragment, and shut it. Harry felt Quirrell's cruciatus hit the wall and scatter. Quirrell looked genuinely confused for the first time. He'd been told, Voldemort had told him, that the connection to Harry's fragment was a vulnerability. That Harry could be influenced through it, controlled, weakened. But the fragment was not being that. The fragment was being the opposite of that. "Touch him," said the voice from the turban, thin and sibilant and furious. "Touch the boy. Use the connection." Quirrell lunged. Harry let him grab his arm, because he understood what the mirror required, and as Quirrell's hands closed on his wrist Harry stepped sideways and pulled, and the momentum of the lunge carried Quirrell into the mirror's direct reflection, and the mirror, recognizing Harry's proximity and his singular desire, which was not to use the stone but to keep it away from Voldemort, gave the stone to Harry. He felt it appear in his pocket. Quirrell screamed. Not from the mirror. From Harry's wrist, the contact point where Quirrell's hands were still holding him, the skin burned silver white where the grip landed, and Quirrell released him with a sound like something tearing and stumbled back with his hands blistering, and the fragment in Harry was doing something Harry had never felt from it before. It was burning outward from the scar through the defensive wall it had built, burning along the connection that Voldemort had been using, burning toward the main soul. Not attacking. Transmitting. The same thing Harry had done with the diary, the same method, except there was no blank page here, no fragile fragment waiting to receive. This was the main soul, barely conscious, barely functional, but present. Harry felt it receive the transmission and recoil from it with the full force of something that had been pure cold cruelty for 70 years encountering the weight of 10 years of adapted warmth and human experience, and the recoil was enormous. Quirrell collapsed, and the voice behind the turban screamed something that was less language than pure volition, pure fury, the sound of a thing refusing to feel what it was being shown. And then Dumbledore was there. He came through the fire barrier as if it weren't there, moving with a speed that his age and his manner had never suggested he possessed, and what Harry saw in that movement was what Dumbledore actually was when the warmth and performance were stripped fully away, someone with a century of battle-earned power and the specific quality of a person who has been holding back for a very long time and has just decided to stop. Voldemort's presence fled Quirrell between 1 second and the next. Not extracted. Not destroyed. Fled, a mist, a shadow, a thing too diminished to sustain itself without a host, moving through the walls and gone. Quirrell collapsed. Harry stood in the middle of the room with the Philosopher's Stone in his pocket and his scar blazing and the fragment behind it still burning with the force of what it had just done, and he felt it, the aftermath of the transmission, settle back into warmth. Spent. Real. He looked at Dumbledore. Dumbledore looked at him. "The stone," Harry said, and held it out. Dumbledore took it. He looked at Harry's hand. "You're not burned," he said. "No," Harry said. "Quirrell blistered on contact with you," Dumbledore said. "Your mother's protection, partially," Harry said. "But the fragment helped. It was defensive." Again. He touched his scar. It was still warm. "It doesn't want him to take me back." Dumbledore looked at him for a long moment. At the mirror. At Quirrell unconscious on the floor. At the stone in his hand and the boy standing steady in the middle of a room where Voldemort had just been. "Harry," he said. "This needs to end. The secrecy. The private management. All of it." He paused. "What happened here tonight, what has happened since September, the wizarding world does not know the full picture. They know what the Sorting Hat said. They know a fragment was found. They do not know," he paused. "They do not know what I have been doing for 52 years. What my plan was. What the alternative is." He looked at Harry. "I think they need to." Harry held his gaze. "You're suggesting a disclosure," Harry said. "I'm suggesting," Dumbledore said, that the decision about disclosure belongs to you. They came back through the protections. Quirrell left for the medics who would arrive in minutes from McGonagall's signal, and Harry stood in the chamber below the trapdoor with Ron and Hermione and the stone in Dumbledore's pocket and the full weight of a decision. "Tell me what you're thinking," Hermione said. "I'm thinking," Harry said, "about what the hat started." He looked at them. It broadcast. That night, in September, it made the choice not to keep this private. It said there was a Horcrux in this boy, and it said it to 400 people because it's bound to truth, and it decided the truth belonged in the room. He paused. It was right. Everything that's happened since then, all of it, happened because the truth was in the room. McGonagall knowing, Snape being parallel, Draco, all of it follows from the hat's broadcast. He looked at the ceiling, at the trapdoor above. The hat did a small broadcast. Into one room. "You want to do a bigger one," Ron said. "I want to finish what the hat started," Harry said. Dumbledore's experiment. The 52 years of research. The plan that had me dying at the end of it. The extraction method that actually works. The diary being gone. Voldemort in Quirrell all term. He paused. All of it. To everyone. How? Hermione said. Harry thought about the sorting hat. An ancient artifact bound by truth, that had decided one September night to speak aloud what it found inside one student's head, and in doing so had detonated a secret that had shaped the entire wizarding world's approach to its most dangerous enemy for 50 years. Dumbledore has resources, Harry said. Communication resources. The Wizengamot, the Daily Prophet, the Magical Broadcast Network. He paused. I'm going to ask him to call a session. An open one. And I'm going to say what happened. They'll lose their minds, Ron said. Yes, Harry said. For a while. He paused. But the alternative is Dumbledore managing this quietly, and I'm done with quiet management. The wizarding world gets to know that their plan for defeating Voldemort involved a child they didn't tell. And then they get to be part of building a better one. Ron looked at him. You're not scared of standing up in front of the Wizengamot? No, Harry said. You're 11. 12 in July, Harry said. Ron grinned. He couldn't help it. It was the enormous uncomplicated grin of someone who has signed on to something bigger than himself and is finding, unexpectedly, that it suits him. Right, he said. Wizengamot. Let's go. The broadcast happened 3 days later. McGonagall had arranged the logistics with the focused efficiency of someone doing the best work of a distinguished career. Dumbledore had made the calls, the Wizengamot, the Ministry, the editors of the 4 major wizarding publications, and through a network that Harry didn't fully understand, the community notice boards in Diagon Alley, Hogsmeade, and 17 other magical communities across Britain. The Magical Broadcasting Network carried the announcement as a scheduled address, the kind only made for events of genuine national significance. Harry stood in the Great Hall, which had been open to the press and to a selection of Wizarding World representatives, and looked at the assembled faces, Fudge in the front row looking like a man who had been told this was important and is hoping it will be short, the Hogwarts staff behind the head table, the press with their quick quotes quills poised, Dumbledore to his left with his hands folded and his face composed, McGonagall to his right with her spine as straight as a rule, and he took a breath, and he spoke. He spoke for 47 minutes. He told them about the Horcrux. What it was, how it had been created, what it had meant for his entire life before Hogwarts, the cupboard, the isolation, the deliberate management of his circumstances by the man standing to his left. He said Dumbledore's name clearly, without anger or dramatics, with the factual clarity of someone describing a documented history. He said what Dumbledore had planned. He said what the plan had required. He watched Fudge go progressively paler. He told them about the 52 years of research. About the 1847 manuscript. About the extraction method, what it required, why it worked, why Dumbledore had believed for 20 years it was impossible. He told them about the diary. He told them what he had done in that bathroom on the 29th of November with a house elf and a quill, and the connection between his own fragment and the one that had been waiting in the dark for 50 years. He told them about Quirrell. About the Philosopher's Stone. About what had happened in the last room 3 nights ago, Voldemort present, Quirrell burning, the fragment throwing itself against the scar channel and shutting it. And then he told them about what the fragment had become. He told them this carefully, because it was the part that most required care, the idea that a piece of Voldemort's soul, anchored in a child for 10 years, had developed genuine independent character through the shaping influence of that child's life, and had used that character to protect its host and to help another fragment choose release. He told them this was not a comfortable truth. That it complicated everything about how they thought about soul magic, about Horcruxes, about the relationship between origin and identity. The fragment in me is not Voldemort, he said. It never was, fully. It was made from him, in the moment of his first murder, and then it spent 10 years becoming something shaped by everything he wasn't. I don't think that was his intention. I think it was an accident, in the same way I was an accident. 2 accidents from the same night. One of them was a problem. The other one has been, he paused. He looked for the right word. A partner. In solving the problem. The hall was completely silent. There are 5 more Horcruxes, he said. I don't know where all of them are yet. I'm working on it. Dumbledore has research that covers some of the theoretical ground. He's agreed to share it with a broader group of qualified researchers, not just to manage it in private. He glanced at Dumbledore, who inclined his head by 2 millimeters. That's new. It starts this week. He looked at the press. At the quick quotes, quills moving furiously. The fragment inside me is not ready for extraction yet, he said. When it is, when both of us are ready, the extraction will happen. I will not be killed as part of the plan to defeat Voldemort. That plan is over. He said it flatly, without performance. The plan now is to find the 5 remaining Horcruxes, destroy them by the appropriate methods, and address the main soul when there's nothing left supporting it. I'll be alive at the end of it. That's not a negotiation. That's just what's happening. A beat. Fudge said, in a voice that was trying to sound authoritative and was significantly not managing it, Mr. Potter, the ministry would need to, there are protocols, Minister, Harry said, and his voice was entirely pleasant, you're welcome to be involved. Genuinely. The more resources applied to finding the remaining Horcruxes, the faster this goes. But the plan is mine. The execution is mine. He paused. The ministry's role is support. Not management. He held Fudge's gaze until Fudge looked at his notes. Thank you. He looked out over the assembled room. At the journalists, the officials, the students who had crowded the gallery above, the whole school watching, the older students who had been here in September when the Hat had spoken and had spent 3 months watching something unfold that none of them had fully understood. He looked at Neville Longbottom in the gallery, who was leaning on the railing with his eyes wide and his mouth slightly open. He looked at Draco Malfoy in the Slytherin section, composed as stone, showing nothing, but something in the set of his jaw that looked like relief. He looked at Ron and Hermione at the Gryffindor table, who were both looking at him with the steady, warm, entirely matter-of-fact expressions of people who had been here for the whole thing and found it entirely consistent with who Harry was. The Hat spoke the truth in September, Harry said. It had to, it's bound to truth, that's what it is, that's what makes it extraordinary. And the truth it spoke was complicated and frightening, and it detonated something that everyone would have preferred to stay private. He paused. I think it was right to speak. I think truth being complicated and frightening is the worst possible reason to keep it quiet. He paused one more time. We're in this together now. All of us. You deserved to know that from the beginning. He stepped back from the podium. The hall exhaled. And then the noise began, questions, reactions, arguments, one journalist standing up to ask 6 things at once and being gently but firmly silenced by McGonagall, Fudge consulting with someone from the Ministry in a whispered panic, several Wisengamot members moving toward Dumbledore, and in the middle of all of it, the specific quality of a secret that has been detonated and is now present in the room. Present for everyone, available to everyone, and cannot be put back. Harry stepped away from the podium and stood for a moment at the edge of the dais, and in his chest the fragment ran warm and steady as a heartbeat. Good, it seemed to say, in its non-language, its temperature and direction and weight. That was good. I know, Harry said, quietly, under the noise of the room. We're not done yet. No. The warmth. But we started. We started, Harry said. He looked at the room, the chaos, the noise, the 52-year secret moving through it like a stone through water, the ripples going in every direction. All the way back in September. The hat started it and now we're finishing it. He paused. However long that takes. The fragment pulsed. Once. Twice. The steady rhythm of something alive and adapted and genuinely itself, wrapped around the core of him like a held hand, not a parasite on a heartbeat anymore, not a squatter in a body that wasn't its own, but something between a companion and a conscience, something that had been made in darkness and had spent 10 years in the particular quality of Harry Potter's darkness and had emerged as something new. Not Riddle. Not Harry. Something that had needed both to exist and had outgrown the need for either. Something that was, in the end, simply itself. Both of us, Harry thought, and started walking toward Hermione and Ron. The room was very loud. He didn't mind. Later, much later, after the hall had emptied and the journalists had filed and Fudge had been managed by Dumbledore with a patience Harry deeply respected, Harry went up to the astronomy tower. Clear night. Cold. The stars he was beginning to learn the names of stretched overhead and the patterns he'd started memorizing during the long astronomy sessions, Orion, Cassiopeia, the Pleiades catching the moonlight in their cluster. He sat at the base of the telescope mount and didn't write in his journal. He just sat. He thought about what came next. The 5 Horcruxes, wherever they were, in whatever dark places Riddle had chosen for them. A ring. A locket. A cup. A diadem, maybe. That word had come from the fragment in a half-dream the previous week, the word and the sense of something lost and cold and very beautiful. Something else that hadn't resolved yet. 5 things to find and destroy, and then one thing to do within himself that nobody had ever done and that the 1847 author had called a parting, freely chosen. He thought about whether the fragment was ready. He checked, the way he'd learned to check, inward, direct, honest. The warmth said, not yet. But soon. All right, he said. We'll know when. He looked at the stars. Somewhere in the castle below, Dumbledore was meeting with the first group of researchers who would now have access to 52 years of Horcrux theory. Somewhere McGonagall was writing something official and important with the satisfaction of someone who has been waiting a long time to write it. Somewhere Snape was in his dungeon and probably not sleeping and definitely thinking, in the parallel and unjoinable way that was Snape's version of alliance. Somewhere Draco Malfoy was in his dormitory with the specific relief of someone whose father's terrible plan had been cleanly derailed. Somewhere, he believed this, he couldn't prove it and he believed it anyway, the diary fragment was gone to wherever separated adapted souls go when they're finally done. Somewhere it existed in a state that was neither the hungry isolation of the diary nor the cold ruthlessness of its origin. Something made new by the specific accident of 2 soul fragments grown warm in 2 different bodies, one too long alone and one finally not alone at all. He hoped it was somewhere good. The stars were very bright. Below him, Hogwarts hummed with its 1000-year magic, full of sleeping students and awake portraits and a giant squid somewhere in the black water doing whatever giant squids do when nobody's watching, and somewhere in all of it the beginning of a truer story about Harry Potter, not the one that said he was a weapon aimed at a target, but the one that said he was a person with a plan and people who trusted him and a piece of complicated warmth in his chest that was his in the only way that mattered. We started, the fragment had said. Yes, Harry thought. We started. He gathered his cloak against the cold and sat under the stars and let the future be the future, present, possible, genuinely unwritten, and felt, in his chest, the warm pulse of something that had spent 10 years becoming ready. He could wait. He was very good at waiting. The stars turned slowly above Hogwarts, and the castle kept its 1,000 years of secrets, and one of its smallest and strangest residents sat at the top of the astronomy tower with a fragment of adapted darkness tucked against his heart like a coal that had learned to be warm without burning, and looked at the sky, and thought, all right. What's next?